We're going to be ready to start in just a couple minutes. We're waiting to see if the captioner's hooked in, so bear with us.
Yeah, here.
I got to figure out who the heck I'm calling.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys done this correspondence before?
No, she's bringing me today.
Should I say on the mic, are you there? And see if she types back, hey there. What sci-fi movie did that?
Happy pages.
Yeah, she's typing. Oh, she's slow.
Yeah, you know, it's right yet.
What did she say, but don't start yet?
So I don't see captions.
Well, why would there be captions?
Exactly.
Stop typing on your phone, type on the captions.
She wants to reconnect.
So we're still working on the captioner. You're doing a great job. Appreciate it. Igualmente. I mean, yeah. Without. Oh, we've gotten word the captioner's hooked in. So, rather unusual for tonight's meeting is that staff's going to start the meeting because the ZAB chair and vice chair are not here tonight. So the first order of business will be that I'll do roll call like I always do, and then we're going to elect a chair to run the meeting, and then the meeting will run like any other normal meeting. So bear with us. So what I'd like to do now is we're going to do a quick roll call and then ask for ex parte communications. And without any fanfare, Board Member Hauser, welcome back.
Present, no ex parte.
Thank you. Board Member Sheehan.
Present, no ex parte.
Board Member Simon Weisberg.
Present, no ex parte communication.
Thank you. Board Member Lewis.
Present, I had like a mostly incidental conversation with Councilmember Harrison, mostly about the agenda, but there was minor discussion of an item or two.
Okay, thank you. Board Member O'Keefe.
Present, I got a voicemail from Rena Rickles, but I don't think a voicemail counts. Does it? Anyway, I got one. I didn't return it.
Good old days. Board Member Brazil Clark.
Present, no ex parte.
Thank you. Board Member Solosky.
Present. I also got a voicemail from Rena Rickles. I did call her back. We had a very quick phone conversation morning of April 13th, this morning, regarding 1436 Campus Drive and concerns about the scale of the project and the fit of in the neighborhood. Very quick. It was no more than several minutes long.
Thank you. Board Member Donaldson, and welcome back.
Thank you. Excuse the noisy mic. I also had a call from Rena Rickles, but I went to my voicemail. I didn't return it. So no ex parte.
Thank you. And Board Member Teresa Clark.
Present, no ex parte.
Okay, so for those folks that said ex parte tonight, I think there was 4. We're going to need you to fill out the form to characterize as best you can the ex parte communication.
That's why I wanted to know if it counted, because I don't want to fill out the form. I'll just write voicemail on it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. The next thing would be the board deciding who wants to be the chair for this meeting.
I nominate Shoshana.
I second.
Chair.
I third.
All right.
Okay, thank you. That was quick. Let's just do... I've never chaired a meeting before, and I guess I haven't paid attention. I'd like to not do a roll call vote. Is there any... Can we just do like a verbal yay, nay? Is there anybody that says no? Abstain? So, the best part of the meeting for me tonight will be turning this over to Chair O'Keefe. Thank you.
In my classroom, they call me Chief O'Keefe. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. I haven't done this before, so staff, you are welcome to help me out if I forget one of the things I'm supposed to do. I believe we start with non-agendized items. Is that right? Or do we do the consent calendar first?
Public comment.
All right, public comment for non-agendized items. Is anybody here to speak on something that's not on the agenda? This is non-agendized, or is this? Oh, okay. Oh, okay, we do have a couple speaker cards here. So, let's see. Can Mary come up? You have 3 minutes, and then I've got 5 more cards after that. Is it 3 minutes or 2?
We're doing 3.
Huh?
Right up here at the podium.
Yeah, come stand over there and speak into the mic, state your name, and tell us what you came for.
Okay. Have somebody else, if I take up more than 3 minutes, she's willing to give me her time.
We don't actually do the time transfer, but if you filled out a green card, you'll have 3 minutes as well. Is that all right? And if you didn't fill one out, you can fill one out later.
Okay.
All right.
Hi. Good evening, everybody, fellow citizens, my neighbors, and to you, board members. We live at 1615 Martin Luther King, and I want to come here tonight to discuss about that. It's a residential apartment building which they're proposing to put a 6,000-pound cell phone tower on top of. 17 units, has children. The proposed unit has very high dangerous voltage and a backup gas generator. There's children in the building as well. We think it could be a dangerous accident waiting to happen. We have beautiful views of the bay and hills. My garden is of nesting owls, red-tailed hawks, crows, and ravens. They want to cut right through my garden in the back to put that. It would interfere with my view and my neighbor's view of the surrounding bay and the hills. The building size is already too big for the site that it's on. It's out of character for our neighborhood. We have kind of a quaint neighborhood. A tower would make this site even more uglier. Already it's too big, the building's too big for the lot. When it rains, water has no room to drain. It floods the street in the city. You can see it if you go by after rain. The building's not aesthetic. It's an old, ugly 1960s building. To add anything more would really change the character of our neighborhood. It's poorly, cheaply designed. Roofs leak, windows leak, balconies fall apart and been replaced 2 times. We have flat, no room for drainage. We go there now, there's soft spots on the roof. As I handed in before information items, and I gave you folks photos, this is the electrical panel, and this is the fence, have never been updated. The building's 1965 or 67. I used to manage it for 25 years. The owners have changed, and the new owner doesn't do any maintenance on the building but wants to put this tower in. We have an old elevator in order to access the building and to we have a secured building, so in order to access this, you have to have keys. Right now, we have Verizon come in, Dish come in, all these other groups come in, and basically, when you would have people coming in for a cell phone tower, we wouldn't know who. It would be random contractors 24/7. They'd be hopping several fences to get to the unit. They'd be walking over 6 or 7 different bedrooms. The elevator would be 15 feet from my bedroom, and essentially heavy tools, no more than 600 pounds, will cause the elevator to stop, if there were more than 600 pounds. There's a risk of a gas diesel generator. We've already had 2 fires in the building. Any equipment, their nearest extinguisher is about 1 floor away or way in front of the building. They'd have to go outside and around. Ceilings are inferior. They leak. There's about 7 units that have leaks in them. No permits have been pulled on any of the work that's been there. There's no property manager. Landlord doesn't answer, respond. We have disconnected phone numbers. Roof has rotted wood on it. The pictures you have from info show the rotted wood that they put a new roof on. Right to privacy is lacking for tenants around, for neighbors around. It's a locked, secured building. Financial impact on the neighborhood, someone else will discuss at the end. And I'm a little cut off there. I'm afraid, my bottom line, let me just finish. I'm very afraid of an earthquake. I've lived in the building on the top floor, and when the big earthquake happened, it swayed. And a 6,000-pound piece of equipment is not going to sway.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I please ask you to really look at it thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One question.
There's a question for you.
Was that 1650 Shattuck?
It's 1615 Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh,
Way.
I'm sorry. 1615 MLK.
Martin Luther King Jr. Way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Right.
for your time.
Thank you, Mary. Next is Michelle. Okay. Next is Ilana.
Hi there. I am also extremely opposed to the tower on 1615 MLK. I'm a homeowner. My family and I, we invested in a home on Bonita, which is just a couple of doors down from where they're proposing this tower. And I'm concerned, I have a young child, he's 8 years old. I'm concerned about the radio frequency waves. I'm concerned about the property value. We have done a tremendous amount of research. We have galvanized the neighborhood. No one in the neighborhood is interested in having this, aside from the man who doesn't live there but who owns the building and is going to make a tremendous amount of rent potentially if it does go in. So there are nearby, there is a preschool. So there are at least 100 children that spend Monday through Friday near that will be near this tower. So I'm highly opposed to it, and I encourage all of you, there's no need for another cell phone tower. They claim that it's for emergency purposes. I get perfect service. It's not been, there are cell phone towers, and others will be speaking about. There are other Verizon towers that are within less than a mile, 0.7 miles. I think one's even a few blocks away. So I just want to underscore that I'm concerned as a property owner to be putting something like this, especially when it's so close to a commercial area on Shattuck. It's just several blocks away, and they can choose a commercial area as opposed to the residential area that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ilan. Is Ilan here? Yeah.
This is just a meter. I'm also here to speak in opposition to the 1615 MLK Tower. Time is passing, and what I want to say is I live a half a block away. The tower will be in direct line of sight of my housemate's bedroom, which is directly next to mine. The situation that we're in right now, kind of speaking really plainly, is in 1996, the Telecommunications Act was passed. You guys know the laws. You can't deny a cell tower based on health issues. But this is the primary complaint, and this is the primary shadow of having a cell tower in your neighborhood. They're designed to work for 5 to 6 miles, but the majority of the radiation actually gets absorbed in the first quarter mile. So the people living in the proximity of the tower absorb most of the cost of having this tower from a health perspective, decreasing the ability for people to sleep, to relax, and long-term consequences include cancer. And that was 1996 when this law was passed and when FCC put their standards in place. We've had 21 years of scientific studies that conclude over and over and over again the non-industry studies about the negative health effects. So I know you can't deny a tower for those reasons, but I'm asking you to look at other reasons to deny that tower. But for me, I will have to move if that tower goes in because I cannot withstand that level of radiation. And to give you kind of a sense of what that is like, we can't see the radiation, right? This is why we're having this big scientific debate about it, because we can, unlike cigarette smoke, which we can smell and our bodies can have a visceral reaction to, we can't actually perceive when we're being radiated. But these things have been designed and created in order for us to actually deduce how much radiation we're being exposed to, and I've been trained to assess living spaces and public spaces for people's health with these meters. And they have functionality that lets you hear what they sound like. This is an actual recording of the same 4G LTE cell tower that Verizon would put in place. Now, this is continuous. We're not actually hearing this unless the equipment is. Our bodies that live there are getting hit 24/7, and we can't put it in airplane mode. It's not something that we can get away from if we live there. Now, we have a school. We have sensitive children that live nearby, and one of the things that impacts them is concentration and the ability for them to actually relax and take in the information that the teachers are teaching. And so my request is, please do your best to find some other reason that's legal for you to deny the permit.
Thank you, Ilan.
Yeah.
Next, we have Yuko.
Okay, I live at 1614 Bonita Avenue, directly behind the proposed cell tower. I'm also very against this 8-antenna cell tower. I looked up 8-antenna cell tower on Google, and it's huge. The cell tower will affect our property value. There's several websites that, in fact, New York Times had an article about it. And I'm a homeowner. Our house is the biggest investment we have. Now, the owner of the building, 1615 MLK, I believe he has at least 10 buildings that he owns in Berkeley, Oakland, around here. And, you know, it would affect him a lot less than it would affect us. The church, the preschool and the church is right behind the cell tower. I mean, it's only about 30 or 40 yards. They are, I've been in contact with them, they are afraid that the enrollment will decrease because of the perception of the effects of the radiation. And they're very afraid of what that could do to their enrollment, and they might, you know, there are also articles about schools, preschools, and closing because of cell towers. The building itself is already large for our neighborhood. It's ugly. And the cell tower, I've seen the proposed plans and elevations. It's really ugly, and it would block our view. It would be right where our bedroom would look right onto the cell tower. It would block our views, and we would have to look onto this ugly thing all day long. And you know, I also very concerned about the radiation, as Ilan said. It's common knowledge now to keep our cell phones out of our pockets and off our bodies. So why would we want to live with this huge cell tower over our heads? It's 8 antennas big. I urge you to Google it. Google an image of it. It's huge. I can understand putting, you know, I've seen these small antennas on utility poles that they go up everywhere, and those maybe I can stand, but 8 antenna cell tower, it does not belong in a residential area, and I urge you to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think next we have Joshua.
Hi, I'm also talking in opposition to the cell phone tower. I am a resident of 1615 Martin Luther King Jr. Way. I also happen to have a PhD in engineering and have published peer-review articles on RF engineering, antenna design. And I'm looking at this from a different perspective. I read through in detail the report, and I have enough technical knowledge to understand that the report was substandard and can actually make the claim that it's within compliance of the FCC. During their meetings, I had requested that they do a more thorough treatment that could be repeatable and reproducible, but they have refused to do that. Specifically, they don't show the 3D radiation patterns for the antennas that are proposed. That's kind of a big issue. If you could imagine, this is a wave, and if you remember back in your high school, you might have done that two-slit diffraction pattern example, where you shine a light behind 2 slits, and it creates this diffraction pattern. That can create local hotspots of much higher intensity due to constructive interference. And they have not evaluated the propagation pattern for the constructive interference for the proposed tower, and thus they have no way to prove they're within compliance at all areas within the FCC limit. This is a sort of kind of standard proper treatment that should be done. Given this, I contacted some colleagues that I have that are professional RF engineers working in antenna design, and they submitted a report as well, claiming that this proposed report was substandard. And actually, I looked quickly at the report also being proposed for today, and it has the same substandard approaches and methodologies that were used. So really, they can't in any way substantiate that they're within the FCC limits and rules and regulation. I gave a detailed list of all the proper analyses that they would need to do to prove that, and they've yet to do that. Those include looking at the weather patterns, which can also affect RF radiation, the topography, the building, and the current levels. They haven't even quantified or determined the current level. If you have that little device there, you could go around and see what the current levels. They haven't done that in our area. So they don't know if the addition of the cell phone tower that they propose are bringing it above the limits, or just their independent single antenna, which is the only radiation pattern they actually provided, would bring it above the limit. So they're proposing 8 individual antennas, and they've only analyzed 1 in their analysis, which is completely improper. In addition, our building is a soft-story building. Adding additional weight on top of a soft-story building is particularly bad, especially in the place that it's proposed. It's proposed off-center from the center of mass. Soft-story buildings tend to have problems in shear, so any sort of earthquake would be substantiated by the presence of this additional weight off-centered in the building. It would be much better if they would build it into the basement, where that weight wouldn't contribute to a possible collapse during an earthquake. So all told, the whole engineering plan is really substandard and really should be addressed.
Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a question? Just to be clear, this is not on our agenda today.
No, this is
right?
not.
Okay.
No,
But
just there's
it
a
relates
reference
to this and also the one on the agenda this week as well.
And it's totally appropriate to come and speak to this. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed something, because you'd referenced a report and so.
Last, we have Lori.
Good evening, I'm Lori Zimmett. I'm the last one. Okay. A number of us can't be here when the actual proceeding is going to be, and they're speaking tonight to inform you and hopefully provide that information to you. I'm the one who comes in at the last one, which doesn't have the technical. I'm not a resident. I live at 1621 Martin Luther King. I'm not in the apartment house. I come with the common sense to say, I know you guys are stuck with federal rules. I know you can't discriminate. I know the health effects stuff is off your table. And having said that, this is the easiest one for Berkeley that I think you could ever find. Oh my God. It's in a residential area. Okay. They want to put it on top of an apartment house where people live 24/7. Really? In a highly desirable, people move to North Berkeley, including myself, because it's got great property value and it's a great neighborhood. It's a monstrosity as an apartment house, but they're great people, don't you think? I guess the thing I would just make as a pitch for you guys is to think that here you've got this apartment house 24/7 with children and people living there, and then you've got businesses nearby who are Berkeley businesses who can get the friggin' money from these corporate cell people to keep it in Berkeley versus some landlord who's living in Piedmont who's going to take the money from off them because they're living there. You got the church business, people coming to pray, they're not looking for a monstrous thing going on. You've got the preschool of these kids sitting out there, I hear them. I like hearing them cry, but they're not crying off a cell tower. They're crying because they've got some, little child injury that's going on, that somebody offended them. I'm the one who lives next door to it. I live next door to my neighbors in the apartment house. My property value, as you know, is going to pummel because of this. And let me just quickly read that it's not the health stuff that's going on, it's the perception of the health stuff. And so let me just quickly read my other neighbor. We're a very close-knit group of people, as you can tell. The installation of a cell phone tower will lower property values in the neighborhood, as most people do not want to buy near a cell phone tower, as has been documented in numerous studies. I'm going to stop, and this is the part I want to leave you with. It's not an accident that the seller property questionnaire used by the California Association of Realtors has a box that must be checked off disclosing whether or not a cell phone tower is located nearby. Regardless if you believe in health or not believe in health, regardless that you're constricted by federal rules, do the right thing. This is not the one. This is so not the one that you want to approve and set a precedent for over an apartment house where people live, where schools are with little children, and churches where people live, and those of us who live next door in a highly residential area don't want our property taxes going down. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you to the audience for your other matters that we've kind of come on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Those of you who came to speak tonight who won't be able to be there for the proper hearing, I encourage you to put your comments in writing. Actually, Greg, do you know when is this coming before us?
I think it may be that it's here in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks? Okay, so what would be
Confirm that, but it's going to be real soon if it's not in 2 weeks.
Assuming it is in 2 weeks, what would be the deadline for submitting written comments?
It's confirmed it is in 2 weeks. The notice was mailed today.
Okay.
And the deadline for written comments?
Mm-hmm.
Well, ideally, it's the week before.
So just can you give me like a day and a time for these people so they can get it into the packet?
That's true. A week from today.
A week from today?
I can't do math anymore. I don't even know what is today. The 20th.
Okay, so anybody who wants to provide written comments for this, that will be in the packet. It's a week from today, the 20th. And if,
And
well, I think it'll, so anything you've sent before should come in the packet for when this is agendized. But if you have additional comments, I encourage you to submit them, especially because we have a number of absent members today, so they didn't get the benefit of your comments. But if you provide them in writing, we do read the packets, so we'd appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming, all of you.
And if I can elaborate on that, the best way to get correspondence to the board is to deliver it by next Thursday. We also accept correspondence on the Tuesday before the meeting and then the Thursday, but that just means it's less time for everybody to absorb it. And the other thing is we've received probably 30 or 40 emails in the last couple of weeks, and we're packaging them up, and they'll be distributed next week to you guys.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so if you've already sent comments, and they will be in the packet. All right, thank you. So any other non-agendized items people would like to comment on? No. Okay, now I guess we do the consent calendar.
Yeah, I'd like to make a recommendation,
Let's hear it.
at least for part of the consent calendar, is to move the minutes, to do that at the end of the meeting.
Oh, because there's an issue with the minutes?
Yeah, it's just so we can have some time to work out some of the language about the
Okay.
old minutes. But everything else on the consent calendar we have no comment on.
Okay, and any objection to moving the minutes off of the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none. We'll go ahead and do that. So the consent calendar currently consists of 2075 Eunice, 2015 Shattuck, and 800 Hines. And I haven't gotten a chance to look here. Are there any comment cards on those three items? None? Is there anybody who came to speak on one of those three items? All right,
And-
open up. Yeah.
And I need to clarify that somehow there's some agendas floating around that show that their 2015 Shattuck Avenue would be recommended to be approved, and then that's not the action the city is asking for. In fact, it's to continue.
Mhm.
And Eunice is to approve, as well as the 800 Heinz project.
Okay, is everyone clear on that? The numbers 2 and 4 are to approve, and number 3 is to continue off calendar. Any comments about the consent calendar?
I will move the consent calendar as recommended by staff.
Second.
All right, and that's minus the minutes. Okay, any other comments? All right, should we do a roll call on consent?
Sure. Board Member Hauser.
Yes.
Board Member Sheehan.
Aye.
Board Member Simon Weisberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Board Member Brazil Clark.
Yes.
Board Member Board Member Salaski.
Yes. John is fine.
Excuse me. Board Member Donaldson.
Yes.
Chair O'Keefe.
Yes.
And we'll just note that Board Member Clark is not here right now.
Oh, where'd she go? She's not here. Well, it passes without her, so the consent calendar is approved. Let's see if I can get this right. 2075 Eunice, you have your use permit.
I would like to comment.
On that one?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it. Jonathan?
I want to just commend the owners and the architects on, I think, a very fine design solution for the project. Appropriate, self-effacing, very modest, and packed with features like a green roof, and I think exceptionally well done for a project of that type. Thank you.
All right. 800 Hines Avenue, you also have your use permit modification, and
I have another.
2015 Shattuck is continued. Another comment?
On 800 Hines?
Yeah.
800 Hines, Riva Cucina is an exceptional business, and it's a bit of a hideaway, and if you don't know it, I'd encourage you, do find out. It's
I second that motion.
I think
And I concur as well.
best
It's
Italian
yeah.
in the East Bay.
Well,
Maybe-
it's good. It's a very good restaurant. I agree.
Charming
Never been
people.
Well, now that they have their liquor license, I'll go. All right. Thank you, everyone. So we've got that done. Minutes are not yet approved. We'll deal with that at the end of the agenda. Next up, we have 1436 Campus Drive.
And before you get started, I just wanted to pass on a special request from members of the neighborhood. They asked that one speaker be granted more than 5 minutes. Or sorry, let me say that again. 5 minutes instead of 2 or 3, and I told them I'd pass on the request to the chair once they were selected. So they're going to come up when they are ready to speak and give you maybe a quick basis as to the why. but I just wanted to say there's been a request for more time.
Okay.
By one member. Thank you.
Okay. So 1436, we do have 2 cards, but let's hear the, oh, no, we have more than 2. We have a lot. Anyway, let's hear the staff report first.
Good evening. We have a use permit for a single-family home with an integrated ADU on the hillside before you. The site is vacant. It's approximately 6,000 square feet. It's a through lot with 2 frontages, one on Campus Drive on the east side and Del Marte to the south. It is zoned R1H, which allows single-family residence as well with plus an ADU. The proposal is a 3-story residential building with ADU on the second floor. The primary access, the vehicular access, will be from Campus Drive, and the ADU would be in the back there, also proposing an elevator of type. In terms of the project data, the project complies with the R1H district's requirements for density, open space, story limits, lot coverage, front and rear yard setbacks. However, the project exceeds the district height limits and encroaches into the front and side yard setbacks. Because of these encroachments and because it exceeds the height limit, the project is not protected under the HAA. Is not subject to the HAA. The city staff has reviewed the application in its entirety, and we recommend that it be approved.
Okay, any questions for staff? None? Teresa?
Oh, I didn't really understand the reason for the exceptions, the request for the exceptions. Could you maybe just explain why the exceptions to the code were asked for and how it relates to the design?
The front yard, the encroachment in terms of the front yard setback, the building, the habitable space itself conforms to the setbacks. What does not conform is the garage. And because this is a steep hillside that slopes down from campus to, towards the east, they wanted to put, at the recommendation of the city, they placed the garage on Campus Drive. Now, because it's steep slope, they had to get it as close to the street as possible. The original proposal called for a bridge, but because of cost considerations, they revised the project and went with the city's recommendation that they place vehicular access on campus, so they had to get it as close to the street as possible. And if I could add, the hillside overlay district allows these types of encroachments. In terms of the height, the applicant's representation to the city is that this is the most feasible way for them to construct it. But I would defer to the applicant to answer that question. But in terms of the driveway, it was at the city's recommendation that it be placed on Campus Drive.
Okay, but you didn't have any answer for the height.
I would defer that to the applicant.
And could you also address the side yard encroachments?
The side yard encroachment also occurs in the front on Campus side, on Campus Drive side, and it's mostly because of the garage. And we are also recommending that the project respects the 4-foot side yard setback, but not the front yard.
For the R1H district, what are the parking requirements?
It's 1 per unit.
So that would be like a minimum of 1 for a project such as this?
Or
2? Oh, right.
No,
There's
no.
an accessory dwelling unit.
Right. No, actually, it's only 1. Under the state rules, accessory dwelling units are not required to provide parking anymore as of January.
Material.
But isn't this the old? Is that the old rules or the new rules?
The new rules, in effect, exempt accessory dwelling units from any parking requirements.
But isn't this under the old rules? Did I read that?
That's how we processed this application because it came in well before.
Yeah, I thought I read two in here,
Yep.
somewhere in the narrative, but
So-
I could
At
be
page
mistaken.
9, it says
On
2
page
are
9,
required.
So under the old rules, because these are being processed under the old rules, the minimum for this project is
would be 2.
Okay.
But could it be, but because of the new rule, we could approve 1 without an exception?
We would have to modify the findings, but otherwise, yes.
John has had his hand up patiently, somewhat patiently.
Thank you. So this is for staff, and I'm not sure how much we should get into this, but there's 145 pages of material here for this project, for this proposal. There were some contentions about neighbors' fences, I think it was a driveway, right-of-way, encroachment. There were back and forth. How relevant is that to this project? Should I take that seriously? What did staff find out about that? I think I understood most of it, but some of it was somewhat confusing. What was the outcome of all of that? If you could answer that, I'm not sure you can.
I don't know if I want to answer all of those, but one thing I would clarify is that.
Well, is it relevant to the project itself?
There is one aspect of your question that's relevant, which is that there was a claim that the neighbor's fence encroaches on this public right of way. Through the code enforcement, it was confirmed that it does not encroach upon public right of way. As terms of then going back and forth, I would rather not comment.
No, that's fine, but there was also something about somebody's driveway, I believe. Am I mistaken?
No.
No, okay.
All right, any more questions for staff? Yeah, Matthew.
I don't know. It's 2 questions. One is, I don't know if staff has talked with the applicant about this, but this is only relevant if the applicant would even support this. But if we were to only require parking for 1 space by processing it under the new rules, would that reduce the violation of the front setback at all? Do you know?
The fronts, no, that would not resolve it.
Okay.
It may resolve the side yard setback encroachment, but not the front yard setback.
So that would make this project more in compliance with general rules for the R18 district, though.
I would remove one of the administrative use permit the applicant is requesting. Correct.
Okay. I don't know if the applicant wants to do that or staff wants to. I just think it's worth considering. My other question was, so in one of the letters I read from neighbors, it mentioned something around like a balcony that was going to be like looking into a child's bedroom, and I think it implied something along the lines of maybe that if the balcony were facing in a different direction, that would not be the case. Is it possible to have the balcony be facing a different direction so that is not an issue and like privacy concerns are resolved?
I believe that's
Does ZAB start?
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, sorry.
I do have one. Yeah, Teresa. So on the height, can you show, because it doesn't show in this section, where is the height being exceeded? From the line?
From the average.
You haven't.
There is a line that goes across the property line. I mean, across the.
Can you say which drawing it's shown on, where it's exceeding the height?
Sure.
So you take it from the property line?
So it shows under P100. Just to clarify, the height limit on this district is 28, and they're asking for 33 feet. So essentially exceed by 5 feet. And we measure height from, finished grade.
So they don't show the height of the tallest point in this drawing.
Yeah, it might be good to look at A101. I believe it's the next page.
Yeah.
The next page?
And
yes, next page.
And it doesn't. And unfortunately, it doesn't appear to tell everything that I'd like it to say, which is we measure average height as the average of the grade beneath the building up to the average of the roof form. If it has a flat roof, then it's the highest point of the roof. But at least this drawing does give you an idea of the highest point, which is one of your questions.
Can you do on the pointer?
Well, actually, if we could, do we
where
have
you figured it?
A101?
That's, yeah. Yeah, these drawings should have.
I don't know if you could see it.
Yeah, there's so much detail in this drawing.
Yeah,
it
well,
would
we
be
have
hard to
the
ascertain
drawing
where
in
the
front of us.
max
You
min
can
is.
just kind of, cursor where you're taking the measurement. I just don't see it, and the person who drew the drawings didn't show.
Is the concern that the building's higher than depicted or
I want to
represented by the
know
plans?
where it's measured from, so I can understand where they're exceeding the height. The mass of the building that's exceeding the height. I would like
Okay.
to see, just have a sense of that.
Okay. Would you be interested in?
Is it like this, or just tell me, I'm just saying, is it just across like this?
It's not one place, it's the average. Like if you took all these, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg or Manny, if you take all these vertical lines, and you add them all up and you average them,
Well,
that's 35 feet or whatever. 33.
we're going to zoom in on the top left.
Okay.
28 is what
Yeah, you,
calls for, but it's now
Right.
5 feet above that.
So as long as you guys don't hold me to this math, I'm
yeah,
just
no,
going
I'm
to try
just
to
trying to
illustrate.
get a sense of it, because it wasn't depicted in the drawing or in the staff analysis, more verbally shown, so I just wanted to get a better sense of that.
Too big. And then- so hopefully, the average height would be measured from, let's just say this, and this isn't the best way to do it because in a hillside condition you could have variations on all four sides of the building that could change the lowest point of the site and the highest point. But usually it's a factor of if this is the lowest point beneath the building, and then somewhere in here we'd have to make a judgment of where is the highest point beneath the building, and we could either use this corner here, or we could decide to say, well, because the parking structure is attached, well, maybe we could say that's part of it. But I think what we did is we used the main form of the building and said, well, if this is the max grade, this is the minimum grade underneath the building, and then there's an average height somewhere in there up.
Oh, an average.
Yeah, so you average
Using an average base?
yeah, you take the max min of the site beneath the building, average those 2 points, and then go up 28 feet and draw a line. And I haven't looked at the roof plans enough to see if we should say that there's an averaging of the roof, or if we would say that these features here should be considered the high point and there wouldn't be any averaging of the roof.
So do you sample just two places?
No, it's all. So it's the max min beneath the building.
Where is this calculation made in the staff packet? We don't
Well,
have that.
if you look at the staff report, it says the building's 31.34 feet tall in average height. Apparently, according to this drawing, they're suggesting to me, if I look at the left side, well, actually, that's where the number was pulled from.
Yeah.
The number right here is 31.34 per the architect. They went
Also,
to school and
it's
did
important
models.
to note that it's a shallow roof, and even though it exceeds the average height, it is underneath the absolute maximum height, if I understand that correctly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
No?
it is below the 35.
Permit over the 28.
Right. The 28 is the average height, not the absolute.
Yeah, and the absolute, well, and there isn't really, the board could grant a break, but there's a 35-foot height limit that's parallel with the grade
Right.
that it does comply with.
Right.
It does? I can't tell that. That's the thing. The 34.05.
Yeah, 30 point, yeah. I'm not even sure. If I measure it that way. I get it. It's right here.
What, do you use some computer software to figure that out?
I think
I'm
we're
serious.
good.
I'm curious. How do you have a program that like AutoCAD like
Uh,
tells you
well,
the average height?
That was hand.
Usually we plot the footprint of the building on a survey that shows all the topographical lines, and then we go, okay, here's the lowest contour, here's the highest, average those 2 points. Usually, then I transfer the numbers onto the plans and then scale it.
Well, that sounds like you just take two samples.
No, I look at all, and I pick out the two that happen to be, one of them's the highest and one of them's the lowest. So it's not per view, it's an
It's based
absolute
off
of
of-
all sides. Yeah, but it's 2 points, which is
It's the average of two measurements.
of the
Not
highest.
the average of lots of measurements. It's the average of two, the min and
That's
the
right,
max.
you're a math person.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble.
Well, I mean,
I'll say
don't
it
know.
differently.
Maybe we're
It's-
belaboring this point and we should move on.
It's the highest point of the lot beneath the building and the lowest point of the
Okay,
lot.
and it's the
beneath
average of
building.
those two.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
We used to use the mean, but we decided that was too confusing. I'm just being weird. Sorry.
Mean, median, mode. We're going to have a test later. Okay, any other questions for staff? All right, let's get the applicant presentation. Is the applicant here? I hope so.
Where's the remote control? Is there a remote control?
Can you stand here so that Mike can pick you up? Is there a reason you want to sit? Do you have a presentation to make?
I'm nervous.
Oh, if you don't mind
So-
standing, because then we can get your.
Are there speakers over there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You
It's
can sit
fine
over
if I
there. The mic will
There's
pick you up.
speakers here.
Huh?
You can use the mic
Mic
over
over
there.
If you sit at the table.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? That'll be just fine. And you have 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay. All right. So.
What's your name? Oh, yeah. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yeah, fam.
Okay. Hi.
Sorry, I'm nervous. Okay, so can we? Do I get to change the slideshow? Or?
You just say next.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, let's start the slideshow. Wait, this isn't it. This isn't the presentation I sent to you.
This is the presentation you sent me.
No, this is the rebuttal. I sent you a different presentation last night. This is not. No, this is an evidence and discovery. This isn't the presentation.
Last night?
Yeah, I sent it to you out like last night. So this is supposed to be an evidence and discovery. I could send it to you now with my phone or something.
We've got to get going, but I mean, your time hasn't started yet, so if you can work this out in the next minute or two, that's fine.
Do you have it on thumb drive?
I have it on my phone.
I do see it. Well, we don't. Do we have Wi-Fi here on that one?
We do have Wi-Fi, the code's outside.
What are you gonna do? Save it on the Z drive? And how are you gonna get it from that little thing over to that other little thing?
I'll show you.
Do you guys want to talk about math?
I'm actually on spring break right now. I do not want to teach math.
So the mean is the average.
All right, we're going to get this figured out. Algebra 2 and freshman math. Mode is the one that occurs most frequently.
That was the one in the middle.
Median is the most. Median is the central data point. Mean is the add them all up and divide by the number. And mode is the one that happens the most.
Occurs the most often.
So,
The most popular.
okay, which really tells you which is the most popular, but may not tell you much else.
So if you have 2, 5, 7, 7, 9.
Yeah.
What's the cosine of 7?
7 is the and the median.
The cosine of 7. I'm teaching trigonometry next week. I need to look it up.
7 or like 7?
7 degrees? Yeah, degrees are radians.
Non sequitur doesn't matter, right?
You guys should all come sit with me.
Do you know what e to the I pi is?
I'm a humanities guy.
-1.
Okay, so I just sent it.
I know.
Exactly the next time I'm in a bar and have nothing.
Yeah, I did. I sent it to you. Right. You definitely have that. Yeah, I should. I'm gonna do that. I feel like I should.
Well, but they need,
this
they
is
need to
important,
do what
right?
they're gonna, they
I
need to
mean,
do what
no,
they're gonna do.
we have to.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Exactly. Talk amongst yourselves. Exactly what I saw.
And be sure to save it onto the computer.
Is this going to be wrapped up in the next minute? Okay, that's fine.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to begin?
Yeah.
Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, Ms. Pham, your 5 minutes has started. Please go ahead.
So, hi everyone. I'm Ya. This is my husband Maxime. Before I go through my recital, I'd like to thank the City of Berkeley for having us, and I'd like to thank a very diligent and patient staff. Everyone I have worked with has been tremendously helpful. So, let me start by asking, how many of you have or know someone who have lived in a household where parents work while a child is tended to by a grandparent? Because for us, both me, my husband, and our cousins and friends were raised in these arrangements. Upper left. Oh, next. Sorry. Shit. Okay. Yeah, okay. Upper left is my bucko. She looked after me when my parents and grandparents all worked. That was all of my aunts and uncles on my mom's side before she had me. They also looked after me while my mom worked. On the upper right is Maxime's babushka with our daughter Lucy. She used to look after Maxime and his sister when his mother worked. Below are his grandparents on his father's side. They look after cousin Masha. All of our grandparents have had or had various physical limitations requiring varied degrees of help from their kids. Next. Oh yeah, can you call next?
Next.
Here are the statistics. So, with our first-hand visceral experiences and the housing policy papers we were reading, multi-generational and accessible housing resonated with us.
Next.
I designed the project with the help of two accessibility specialists, Ms. Rhonda Bonecutter over there, and Rex McLean. So thank you, Rhonda. This project offers a contemporary extended family a barrier-free lifestyle, and I'd like to address this. The site's steep slope and its design needed to be accountable. Oh, next. Yeah. To be accountable for possible drainage and nuisance and fire hazards.
Next.
In response, we bench terraced the site, integrating it with the building's car and foot circulation. Each level's living and leisure area has wheelchair accessibility. A no-step travel path that connects from the motor court path to the forest stop elevator lift, then traverses two south-facing wraparound decks, one walkout deck, basement, down to the terrace portico. This provides no-step access around the home's east, south, and west entries. Our project is beneficial because, first, the design accounts for anyone using a wheelchair, walker, or is pregnant. Second, use and maintenance of both home and garden is easy and enjoyable, with level access to inspect, repair, and cultivate. Third, a kinetic experience exists where you view the rain garden from the elevator lift. This landscape juxtaposes and blends with the surrounding lush canopy and the bay view that advances or recedes while you're in motion. It also provides privacy for dwellers. Granny would not pop up in the middle of the living room unexpectedly. The elevator being outdoor also has many practical usage, like moving furniture easily without damaging interior finishes. It also lets someone use the spa area without using the stairs. And it also helps transport gardening equipment and plants to the rear garden.
You guys have a minute left, just warning you, so if you could wrap up we need to get the entire applicant statement out in that time. So if you have more points, I'd encourage you to move on.
And now I'm going to guide you through the interior and distill many functional benefits. So it's visitable, it's accessible, and it'll be awesome through every level from A, B, C, and D is accessible in all the rooms, basically. Next. So it's important to consider this. you know, in the context of having kids and elderly parents that would live with you, and that's what my design's for. Next, my neighbors have complained about bulk, but you can see, does this look any more bulky than their house? Next, there was a confusion that this was more than 3 stories, but you can see it's similar to other homes on the hillside. Next.
You're out of time.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So I've got your cards, but that was, the applicant gets 5 minutes. So that was,
okay.
So we're going to let the public come up and talk now. Oh, unless there's questions. Yeah, sorry, there's questions for you guys.
I guess my question was, you know, you've exceeded the height, and I just wanted to understand what studies you did to, you know, what was the driving factor of exceeding the height? So I think,
yeah, I can
think
address
you
that.
should just address that.
Okay. So first of all, you know, it wouldn't have exceeded the height if I was able to move it downhill and have access from the Del Mar side, going from downslope up. But the engineer, the traffic engineer, said, you know, that he had concerns about that. So in order to, you know, basically not have to go down a set of stairs after you park in the 20-foot, you know, like space that is accounted for by the AUP, you know, having a floor there on that level A, when you look at the section, you know, it would basically, if you have a floor there, and that was the only habitable floor that was enclosed, then it would still exceed the height limit for, you know, for the bulk of the house. If you take it into, you know, the calculation, if we didn't have level B, C, or D habitable and dug out the basement, it would still, and only level A at, you know, 1,000 or 1,200 square feet of whatever it is, it would still exceed the height limit because we wanted to have like a direct footpath from where the car parks, you know, so you could carry groceries in and get into level A. So, did you have any more?
No, that was it.
John-
Thank you. Okay,
questions
John
about height?
has a question.
First, I commend you on looking at different modes of multi-generational aging in place type housing, different modes of housing. I think there are a lot of different needs out there, and it's certainly a good thing to think about those needs. Are you planning to live in this house in a multi-generational family, or is your intent to sell it to a buyer who has a multi-generational family? I'm not clear about the intent of the
Sir,
development.
my intent is to sell it, but if the market does take a dive, we would live there, and my husband would have to relocate his job.
Build a house that we could be proud of, that we, you know.
Sir, can you speak into the mic?
Sell or live. We wanted to build a house that we could be proud of, that like really reflects what we believe in.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Is to sell, but you know, depending on circumstances, you know, one of the things when we were thinking of when purchasing land and building a house is that, you know, we would have to be able to live in it as a plan B.
Yeah. We have really different, you know, like.
Speak into the mic, please.
Oh.
Thank you.
As a married couple that also, you know, is undertaking these real estate projects together and having sometimes polar opposite preferences for, you know, neighborhoods or housing type, like there's always like a lot of back and forth about what we're gonna do, and you know, he's very risk adverse, and you know, I guess maybe it's because he's also Russian. He also thinks that like market panics are really likely to happen. So any project that we undertake, he has to make sure that, like, we'll be able to, like, hunker down in the long run.
Okay, I think you've answered the question. Thank you. Is that good, John?
Just to follow up, and it's really not apropos the development, but the proposal, but you said your plan B was to live there yourself. Do you have elderly parents that would live with you? I mean, 2 people in, what is it, 6 bedrooms?
5.
I think it's 6, but okay.
5 bedrooms.
Okay.
It's so level B has 3 bedrooms and level C has 2 bedrooms. There's a lot of walk-in closets. We would definitely live there ourselves with our 2 kids.
You have 2 children?
We have 2 children.
Okay, that's part of the answer. Okay, all right.
I have an aunt. She lives in Texas, and one of my cousins goes to UC Berkeley.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yep, Matthew.
I just have a few questions. So staff mentioned that if this were reduced to just 1 parking space, that it would reduce the essentially setback violation for the horizontal setback. I'm just curious at all if you all felt that might make any sense for you all to have just 1 parking spot instead of 2 parking spots if you'd for the site.
Yeah. So the 2 parking spot, we designed that according to the old rules before the I guess SB 1035 or 69. I don't remember the code, or AB laws came into effect. So we designed it with 2 parking spaces for being covered, 1 for each dwelling unit, and a lot of people, especially the neighbors, were concerned about not having enough parking. And so, we were insisting that it's got 2 covered parking already. But then when I look again on the analysis, you could have 4 parking spaces, 2 in the driveway and 2 covered. And realistically, it's in like an upper middle class neighborhood. Most likely people will drive, and having the amount of parking is necessary for, if like college kids are going to classes, and mom's got to go shopping and dad's got to go to work, and at least they're driving to the BART or
if anybody visits.
If somebody visits, yeah, so that we're not taking up, like the road that's already narrow.
So we would prefer to have 2 parking.
Okay. Okay, and my second question is, so I mentioned earlier in one of the letters there is a concern that a balcony like faces towards like a child's bedroom.
Oh, yes.
And so is it possible to have that balcony, to redesign the building to have the balcony
so if you
face
can
a different...
go, I think there's a slide where I show that, mostly from the inside of our bedroom, of our...
I agree.
Can you look the evidence of discovery? Yeah, the one that you were going to show originally. Can you pull that up for like evidence of discovery? I think compiled evidence of discovery 2. Go up somewhere. Oh, go up more. Oh yeah. Okay. Go down. Okay. So I don't know if there's any way to like make this clearer, but it's kind of fuzzy. So if you look at these slides, and if you get a chance later to look at the PDF from the bedrooms, there won't be privacy issues if somebody's like in the bedroom looking out at their property, because I designed like a columnal, poplars and cypress to when at mature height it won't be a privacy concern. And the wraparound deck, that's more or less likely to like be a transit zone, and it's not really a hangout space.
Sorry, when you say mature height, do you mean like you're growing some type of plant or shrubbery?
Yeah. So if you look at the drawings, if you look at the drawings on sheet.
It shows on L100.
if you, yeah, it shows that if you, so if you look at sheet AI 102, and you see like where the elevator is, and down from that, there's like 4 little like plants. Those.
Which sheet? Which sheet did you say?
Sheet AI 102.
So there's the plants that you're talking about. There's 2
Yeah,
circles,
over
the
there.
white.
So yeah, so those are the plants, and when they grow to full maturity, you know, there'll be like a privacy screen where the kid's bedroom window is.
And about how long would it take for them to grow that tall?
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for that, so I'd have to consult a horticulturalist. But those things usually grow pretty fast because I see them all over the place, and they're like 35 feet tall.
Do you have like an idea, like it's less than, like it's something within like less than a year, or
We can
like,
Google it.
No, I think a tree, you're looking at 20 years.
5 trees on this.
So
10 at a minimum.
Unless it's in a different area.
Let's not Google that right now. If you want to come back and
Okay.
tell us, if anybody has that information at any point, you can wave your hand. Any other questions? All right, let's get the public comment started. Thank you very much. You guys can go back and have a seat, and you'll be invited to come back up at the end for to make another statement. Okay. Yes, this is it. All right. So each, I have all these cards. I'm gonna call them in random order, and I'll call the next person so that you can be ready. Okay. I mean, I'll give you 2 at a time, and each person's gonna get. We can do 2 minutes. Let's do 2 minutes a person. There's quite a few. How about 2 minutes, and I'll be forgiving. Okay. Reba Jones is first, followed by Susan Sands. Okay, so Reba, can you come up?
And Reba was the speaker that was looking for additional time.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
And I think it would be helpful to hear the why.
Yeah, I'd like to hear your request if you have one about time.
Well, I would like to speak for 5 minutes instead of the 2 because I am a architect and Ms. Pham is not, and I wanted to make a little bit more comments on the actual plans and design.
All right, well, we have 9 cards. Since I took away a minute from everyone, I saved us 9 minutes, so I'll give you 3. That seems fair. 3 extra. So you can have 5. The math works out.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. My name is Reba Jones, and I live across the street from 1436 Campus Drive. I'm also a licensed architect, and I specialize in high-end single-family residential architecture here in the Bay Area. I've been practicing for over 20 years, and the last 14 have been in high-end residential architecture. Those of us in the neighborhood that would like to see a house built on this lot would like to see a house that is modest and fits into the neighborhood, just not this house. This is a 4-level project, and it was designed for sale and development by Ms. Pham, who is not an architect. Because of her lack of training and end goal of profit, the house maximizes the buildable lot area and is asking for several AUPs. I believe she should hire an architect and incorporate better layouts and features in her project. Furthermore, I feel this is a violation of state law to have her friend stamp the drawings when he did not design the house, nor does he work in residential design. Ms. Pham is trying to sell this house to put forth bonus features for elderly and disabled people. The features are not required by code. Some of these are an external lift, wraparound decks for all levels, access directly to bedrooms and to multiple laundry rooms, offloading zones in the front carport. However, she failed to see design issues that are critical for any buyer. For example, changing the lift to an appropriate indoor elevator is far better for all inhabitants and would preserve the views for which the lift now blocks. Flipping the internal stair to land at a central core of the floor plan would allow direct access to rooms while reducing long stretches of hallways through closets, laundry rooms, and bathrooms. The decks violate setback requirements on 2 levels, restricting fire access between the properties, rendering them unsafe. The space allowed for parking the 2 cars is less than 20 feet in width, which is substandard for 2 cars. Most buyers would want a garage. The potting shed, which is in the front setback, reduces the parking and is very far removed from the garden that it would serve far below. exterior stairs under the front driveway and between the house and the front hillside. Have stairs that go down to access the additional unit. This is a great place for vandals and thieves to hide. There's been extra care taken to show 5-foot wheelchair turnaround areas on the floor plans between furniture that may not exist because it's not built in. However, the code requirements for clearances in front of toilets in several of the bathrooms are not met. Corner cooktops are shown in both kitchens and are not only undesirable but very difficult for anyone to use. It is not a well-designed home. I don't see how any family could use this house. There's only one common space on the top floor, and it's an open plan. The house this size should have more than one gathering place, or at least one per floor. You should be able to tell which room is the master suite, but all bedrooms here are designed fairly equal. You should also not have to send your child down to bed to go through long corridors and through laundry rooms to reach their bedroom. The best way to reach their bedroom is from the outside decks or through the lift. This is not a great way for a family to lift. However, this is a great way for guests who are arriving to go to their bedrooms without having to go through the house. Although we do not know how the future owners will use this house, it is set up perfect to swap out washers and dryers in the 2 laundry rooms for ranges and dishwashers, turning them into additional kitchens. It would be a very attractive 4-unit rental without seeking new permits. We do not want this type of detriment in our neighborhood, as it could depress our property values. We would like a house on the lot, but one that doesn't push for every limit and is in harmony with the neighborhood. I would like to see Ms. Pham redesign, move the lift indoors to be a real elevator, allow access down to the in-law from the stairs on grade along a property line, not under the front carport, and not to be hidden from the street. Remove the bathroom on the lowest level to prevent that floor from being used in the future as a small unit. Reduce the number of full baths to match the bedroom count or less. Remove the potting shed and the storage shed from the front setback. Reduce the overall massing as seen from the street by stepping the building down the hill. And most of all, hire a licensed architect to design the house as required by the state. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions?
I have a quick question based on something you said. So when you were talking about, among other things, like swapping out laundry machines for like essentially kitchen appliances, are you saying that you feel that this is like as it's currently designed, this is a property that could be easily done to be like, say, 2 floors are used as like a family home, and the other floor is like used as rental units, like apartments essentially above a single family home?
You can see that every bedroom pretty much has a door directly out to one of the decks and as access from the outside, which is not typical for a single family home at all. The laundry rooms are on the way to on each of the floors. So you have a kitchen at the top, a laundry room, and then a kitchen in the AUP next to it. So those laundry rooms have doors right to the outside too, so you can actually get to them, go through, switch it out to be a kitchen, go through a hallway to your bedroom. So it would basically make a 4-unit house. The top floor also with the kitchen has a full bath and a half bath, which is really unseen for a floor that has no bedrooms.
I'm just follow-up question. Are there not necessarily exactly like this proposed property, but are there somewhat similar like setups within the neighborhood of like, you know, a family home combined with rental units on the same property or anything like that? Or are there even apartment buildings in the neighborhood?
There's no apartment buildings in the neighborhood. There is one house on the corner that has an in-law in it. I don't know if it's currently being used at all as a rental or if someone is even occupying the space.
Mm-hmm.
John?
And just to piggyback on your comment, because the thought occurred to me in looking at these plans, not strictly rental units, but short-term rentals came
Correct.
to mind as well. To me,
Correct.
to me, it's almost what it's set up for. If you look at it,
it looks more like that than a single-family home to me.
to me also. Just a comment.
That was not a question, John.
No.
Busted. Any other questions? Questions? We will have plenty of time for board comments later. Okay, thank you very much. All right, next we have Susan Sands. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, members of the board. And I'm just a regular neighbor, not an architect. I'm Susan Sands, and I'm from 1430 Campus Drive, next door to the north, to the proposed. My husband, Fred Schlachter, and I have lived there for 27 years. We were married in the house. We raised a son in the house. I love our neighborhood, and I welcome development of the lot next door. But I am, however, opposed to this particular house because it doesn't fit in our neighborhood because of its atypically large size, its placement high on the hillside near the street, and its idiosyncratic design, which Reba just talked about. We've tried to work with the applicants from the very beginning. We met with them in Fremont, then again for 3 hours in our dining room to share our concerns. But the applicants told us straight out at that meeting that they were not willing to change their plans in any way to try to accommodate our needs. And as Na said in her presentation, they also told us they were planning to sell the proposed house, which increases our concern for all the reasons we've just been discussing. I personally am particularly concerned about privacy since we're living next door, despite the staff report's findings of no significant impacts on privacy for adjacent dwellings. I was surprised to see that. Because the proposed house is designed to maximally fill the lot up to the setbacks, it creates a severe detriment to our sense of privacy and well-being in many ways. For example, they propose a large deck with a built-in barbecue where the residents will presumably socialize just 8 feet away from the bay windows in our dining room. And just one other point,
Sure.
and a large deck on the floor below will be just 8 feet from our bedroom window. So I would request that the decks be scaled back or resituated so as not to compromise our privacy. And more generally, I earnestly request that the plans as submitted not be approved.
Thank you. Questions? No. Fred, I forgot to give you a warning. Fred, you're next. You're now. And Richard Grove is next.
Well, good evening, Commissioners. Good evening, Manny. My name is Fred Schlachter. I'm the husband of Susan, who just spoke. We live at 1430 Campus Drive, immediately to the north. We're local. My wife and I both have degrees from UC Berkeley, and I'm a commissioner on the Energy Commission. Formerly, I was on SEAC, the Environmental Advisory Commission. By the way, the cosine of 7 degrees is 1, if you're still thinking. We bought our house 27. Any small angle, the cosine is 1.
Just
Remember,
less than 1.
adjacent, hypotenuse.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a physicist. Sorry,
just less.
I can't help myself. Anyway, we imagined when we bought the house with a vacant lot next door, we imagined the house to be built that would be like ours, or like that of Rick and Rebecca, who were on the south side of the vacant lot. Like the other nearby houses, we're one family, 2 cars, 3 bedrooms, no partridges or pear trees, 2.5 baths, 1 laundry room, and so on. We're 2,400 square feet, which is on the large size for the neighborhood. Ms. Pham and Mr. Noganoff have proposed a house which is somewhat different. They've cherry-picked one house's side setback as an example, another's parking area, another's height. They have pushed all the limits, the result being twice what any other neighbor has. 2 or more families, an unknown number of cars, 5 bedrooms, 7.5 baths, mind you, 2 laundry rooms, and 4,200 square feet. In other words, it's essentially our house and our neighbor's house put together. So there are a lot of manifest detriments. In my last 8 seconds, I'll tell you that we are quite opposed to this, and we have provided a letter from Larry Chang, a local architect who specializes in accessibility design. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, Richard?
Oh, was there a question? Sorry.
I don't think there was, actually. Sorry, no questions.
Okay, thanks again.
Yeah. Richard, and then Patricia's going to be next.
Hello, I'm Richard Groh. I live at 1419 Campus Drive, 3 doors down and across the street. We've lived there 28 years, raised our 3 kids there who are now grown and living in the area. I've worked at the U.S. EPA, continue to work at the EPA for the moment, and for the last 38 years, and was one of the co-signers of the 2-page letter that Fred and others submitted. I think you've already heard that the neighbors and we are not opposed to building on the lot. In fact, we're looking forward to filling in the neighborhood with some good neighbors. There's really only one point I'm trying to get at here, and I had put a 1-page graphic that hopefully will be in front of you. I'll show you it in a minute. But there's several criteria in the report that use the expressions that seem to be key to the terms of bulk, scale, and context for the proposed project. And the report appears to resolve these concerns with statements such as would not be out of scale with the neighborhood. And that's really just the one thing I want to talk about here briefly. And the 1-page thing I tried to, you have somewhere in there, is a graphic of the distribution of the homes, especially the blue and black. This is from small up to large. The red arrow there represents the proposed house. There's a number of data assumptions that go into this. This was based on Zillow data looking at every house. The smaller pegs are for the immediate neighborhood across the street, like a 3-block area. The larger ones are for what we think of as the larger neighborhood, including about 100, 120 homes. This is the point, though. I know somewhere in your packet, whether you've seen it or not, the applicants provided a similar graph that shows their house landing somewhere further into the distribution. There's a number of assumptions that go into that graph we could probably argue about also, but the point is this is the kind of a look that was needed. Somebody ought to take this before anybody agrees that this does not outsize the neighborhood. Bottom line is, I think, and for a number of reasons you've heard here, to view this as a single-family residency is actually ludicrous and defies logic, and we would ask you to reconsider at least, and either oppose this or reconsider the bulk and overwhelming size of this project in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Patricia, and then Nigel is next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia McCarthy, and I am a close friend of Rick O'Connell and Rebecca Lee, who live at 1442 Campus Drive. I'm reading a letter from them to the zoning board, so I'll just dive in. We are the owners of the house at 1442 Campus Drive and have been part of the neighborhood since 2007. We are returning from an overseas assignment in Thailand and will move back into the house in June. We have 2 young daughters, ages 2 and 4. We have personal experience of multi-generational living and aging in place, as Rebecca's elderly Korean parents lived with us at our home for nearly 2 years. In its proposed design, the occupants of 1436 Campus Drive will be able to look down through our skylights into our daughter's bathroom, her bedroom, our family room, our kitchen, and our entire front yard. Our front yard is our only usable outdoor space and is where our 2 young children play. The proposed house will loom 34 feet above our front yard, and the 2 levels of decks will be just 6 feet from our house. The physical mass alone and the proximity to our home will significantly reduce our family's privacy. We don't understand why the proposed design includes south-facing decks at 30 feet above grade that look down into our home and play area and patio. These decks are supposedly wheelchair ramps to access an exterior elevator in the rear of the house. It would, however, make more sense to locate the elevator inside the home rather than have mobility-impaired occupants going outside in the rain to access an elevator located at the rear of the house. These decks encroach on the required setback by 2 feet while causing great detriment to our family's privacy and well-being. Okay, for us, it just comes down to wanting to protect our home and our family from what feels like a complete violation of privacy and a lack of concern for how this project will negatively impact the lives of families already living there. We're all for homes that bear in mind the challenges of aging in place, but it seems clear that the current design does not achieve that goal in the most sensible or logical manner. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to be clear, that was a letter from the neighbors directly to the south?
Yes. Rick O'Connell and Rebecca Lee at 1442 Campus Drive.
Thank you. All right. So that was Patricia, Nigel, and then Andrea. Next.
Madam Chair, board members, good evening. My name's Nigel Blair-Johns, and I've lived on Campus Drive for nearly 12 years, some relative newcomer by the sound of it. And my home is directly across the street from 1436. And while I welcome development of the lot, I've got concerns about the current proposal. I want to take issue with two elements of the staff report, and the discussion on height is particularly relevant because on page 12 of the report under views, it concludes that the proposed dwelling would not obstruct or diminish significant views. I could say when there were story poles on the site, it was clear from the roof line completely blocked my view of the bay, which includes Alcatraz and Golden Gate Bridge from my office window. So the conclusion under LU3 on page 15 is incorrect, and the AUP to allow exceeding the height limit, in my view, should be denied. If the design has now been adjusted to accommodate our views without the benefit of current and accurate story poles, I have no way of knowing if that detriment has been removed, and it would be too late to find out once the house is built. Secondly, under general plan consistency, page 15, with reference to UD 16 and 24, the analysis notes the proposed development is consistent with the neighbourhood. I disagree with this interpretation. I think you've heard others say so too. Our dog and I have walked the Berkeley Hills for many years. Typically, downslope houses have a garage and driveway at or below street level, and the garages may or may not intrude a little into the front yard setback, while the house is set further back and down. This proposal is not consistent with that general pattern in that it uses all the front yard setback for structures right up to the right-of-way, and has living space with windows facing my home at street level from a closer than normal distance. The west-facing wall of my living space is all glass, so the current proposal is highly detrimental to my privacy if the AUP on front setback is granted. For these and other concerns that I share with my neighbours, I do not feel that the staff report draws an appropriate conclusion in recommending approval. I respectfully request that ZAB deny the application and the appropriate plan changes are made. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I have a question but it's for staff, but it's in relation to what point you just made. So you can sit down,
Okay,
sir. Thank you. My question is, how do you make the determination that views are not impacted? Specifically, how did you determine that his view was not impacted?
We visited the site when the story poles were up, and we took pictures. And based on the story poles, it was not fully blocked. In other words, wasn't completely eliminating their view of the bay.
And you went into his house?
We went from across the street. That's outside of, directly from across the street. We didn't go into the house. And their house is slightly higher than the roadway.
But you said it was not completely blocked, but was it impacted?
It is impacted, but not completely removed.
Do you have that? Maybe not right now, but if you have that picture, I'd be interested to see it.
Find it.
Yeah, if you can, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, thank you, Nigel. Andrea?
No, there are no story poles now, but we were at the site when the application was.
Did you take a picture with the story poles in it?
There are many pictures with the story poles.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to see that. Thank you. And then next is David.
Hi, my name's Andrea Keene, and my family's lived at 1423 Campus Drive since 1979. Over the last 38 years, our stretch of Campus Drive has become a major route for hikers, cyclists, accessing Grizzly Peak and Tilden Park. There are parked cars, hidden driveways, blind curbs, and major wildlife, and no sidewalks. AC Transit and Berkeley Unified has bus stops along the street. We are in an urban wildfire zone near the Hayward Fault. Increasing the population density and the traffic on our block should be discouraged as a detriment and a hazard to the neighborhood. The proposed development in its current incarnation could easily devolve into a multi-rental or an Airbnb facility, and this would potentially increase the population density of the block by over 20%, and with all of the associated emergency and civil service problems and traffic. It is a travesty to talk about this proposal in terms of aging in place. I've been doing that in my little 1,000 square foot house for 38 years. And I have, in 1,000 feet, we've had children, we have older people. I mean, this is a travesty. A steep, overpopulated block without sidewalks is inappropriate for disabled housing. Anyone relying on the elevators, electricity, to enable them to get in and out of the building has not lived through a days-long power outage like we have had in our part of the city. And in a wildfire or in an earthquake, how could anybody from the neighborhood group even get in to help whoever might be in there? A true, in-character, single-family home would be welcome, but not a Borg cube stuffed with possibly temporary residents. That would be a real community detriment. I oppose the development in its current form, and I thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for your Star Trek reference. David, and then Elizabeth will be the last speaker.
Hi, my name is David Spinner. I live with my wife Andrea and my daughter at 1423 Campus Drive, and I've been there for 25 years. I believe that the congestion and overcrowding that would be caused by this overdeveloped house would cause a severe detriment both for safety and for safety reasons, and especially in relation to traffic on the street. It's critical to note that traffic on Campus Drive way exceeds its design capacity, which makes the street extremely dangerous. Campus is a 21-foot wide, 2-lane road without sidewalks and with hidden driveways and a blind intersection at each end. One end is a hairpin turn at a 3-way intersection so treacherous that a former homeowner installed driveway stanchions to prevent a third car from crashing into her front room. And then on a wet night not long ago, a speeding driver rolled her car right on the street, right in front of where this house's parking pad would be sited. And the woman was lucky that her car didn't hurtle down over the slope. The street is really dangerous. So somehow Campus has turned into this major artery between Grizzly Peak and downtown Berkeley, even though parked cars commonly pinch the road down to a single lane. And the passing vehicles include trucks, AC Transit and Berkeley Unified buses, cars, SUVs, and many of these en route during rush hour and on weekends, the drivers, they push the limits of safety for cyclists, runners, pedestrians, all of whom are, who live in the neighborhood. The 2-car parking pad in the 1436 plan doesn't go nearly far enough to lessen the impact of this oversized project, and a much more sensible approach would be to reduce the size of the project and or increase the parking. I therefore oppose this project in its current form, and especially because the applicants have already made a claim that they're going to sell, and it looks like the property could easily be converted to rentals. So we don't even know how much parking there's going to be on the street. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Last up, we have Elizabeth Watson.
Madam Chair, ZAB members, good evening. My name is Elizabeth Watson, and I live at 1435 Campus Drive for nearly 12 years. I'm Nigel's wife. Our home is directly across the street from the proposed development. I'm also a zero waste commissioner for the City of Berkeley, so I particularly appreciate your service this evening. Thank you. I have profound concerns about the proposed development and its direct impact on our home and neighborhood. I'm in favor of infill development, but the proposed structure overflows the site. It's detrimental visually and to our privacy, and dwarfs the impact of its neighbors on each side. It is in our face. We will spend many years looking at what is built, and the design and construction materials are important to me. The design specifies a non-reflective metal roof. From personal experience, I know that metal roofs can be highly reflective despite the assurances in the name. Also, the rendering includes a blue roof. The glaring color will be directly in front of us and will greatly diminish the impact of our living area windows, the best feature of our home. Please require neutral or earth tone colors in a truly non-reflective material. The raised roof line and east-facing dormer also contributes to the visual clutter and negative impact of the design. The request to reduce the front yard also creates visual and privacy problems. Despite what Manny said, it is my understanding that there is no garage, and I think we should clarify that. And I also question that there's any room for 4 parking spaces. I don't see that there. But there is no garage and limited storage to accommodate all the inevitable stuff that a single family accumulates, toys, bikes, kayaks, etc., let alone the members of a multi-generational 2-unit building. And we will be looking at all of it. The design limits parking to 2 vehicles or less if a special purpose vehicle is needed to support the proposed handicap-friendly nature of the home. Given that transit can be impractical in the hills and street parking is tight on narrow streets, this is not sufficient. In keeping with neighboring roof lines and setbacks, moving the house back from the road and down the slope from its present siting would make a huge difference to its visual impact from the street, as well as enable adequate parking. I note from Figure 5 in the staff report that the transition from the street clearly ramps up to the house, so the potential to adjust the design to stay within setbacks and height requirements is there. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. All right, so that's the last speaker card. I'd like to bring the applicant team back up for. Well, when you're the applicant team, you get 5 minutes total, and then you get to come back for a rebuttal, which I believe is 3. Well, she wrote applicant on her card, so.
And she was with you.
Yeah, sorry, but I'll give you guys 3 minutes, and I'll be generous, so you guys can come back up now.
No.
You get 3 minutes. You want to come up or not? But if you need a little extra time, it's okay. We definitely want to hear what you got to say. Okay, well, you do have finite time, so we'll do 3 minutes on the clock, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so before we have rebuttals, I'd like, Rhonda to explain what she's seen as an occupational therapist and why, in our efforts to work with her, this is really like a necessary type of housing, because she's worked with a lot of architects and designers.
I would actually recommend, you can pause the time for a second, I would recommend that you use your time to respond to the many comments that were made. I don't think that the value of the design was questioned very much, the sort of the purpose. So I would prefer to hear, in our limited time, responses to the points that were made. Thanks.
Okay, so one of the points is that, it's going to be a rental. But the thing is that appraisals for rentals versus luxury is terrible in the Bay Area. It's just terrible because the lack of the lack of housing makes people want to have luxury housing, and rentals get beat back on price appraisals every day. The neighbors have large decks, and they complain about us having large decks. If we didn't have the walkway, ramp that, lets you go to the elevator, the house would be bigger. If we put the south wall down to where the setback is, it would be bigger in square footage. We've, graded everything so it just fits into, the main building fits into the setback. Fred said that he assumed a house similar to his would be built, but it would not fit because his house is like 49 foot wide. Well, ours, the average goes from 33 feet to 48 feet and averages out to be 40.5 feet. Nigel's office is below finished grade. Because his garage gets graded, and his office goes into the garage. So what gets blocked is when he's standing in his office, but his living room still has views. The wildfire complaints, there's access to escape that if that's the case. An architect, shouldn't be able to tell somebody where they put their toilet. Most architects have to design what their clients want. If they don't, they get fired. And you go and shop for another architect. The engineer is a professional consultant. State laws are there to make sure that buildings don't fall over, that they're safe, that they don't leak, and they're not nuisance and hazards. They're not there to tell you where to put your bathroom or how many closets you can have, or how many people can live with you and your family. The blue roof is seen because of the reflectiveness, and it's actually a slate gray roof. When I light the model so that you could see the shadows and you could see the edging and the shading better, it shows more blue.
And one more comment. There's, I comments about how they want us to have a garage instead of a carport, but as most people know, like half the population doesn't use their garage to put cars in it, and a carport would, force people to park there. Most people just put junk in their garage and park their cars outside, which is why we opted for a carport as opposed to a garage.
Any questions? I have a question. Why do you have 2 laundry rooms and like 6 walk-in closets? What is the idea behind that?
Well, so there's a laundry room on level C for the granny flat, for the ADU, and on level B for the main family. So that's so that granny doesn't have to drag her laundry upstairs in the elevator or through the stairs if she needs to do laundry.
I'm sorry, that's not what I'm seeing on this. I believe am I reading it wrong? The pink part on AI 102, is that the ADU?
Yeah.
So the laundry room is not pink, it's white.
Yeah, it's outside where the granny flat is, and then level B has another laundry facility. And then the level C's, laundry facility is also where the sewing room is, so that basically a family could get together and sew, and like you could do your laundry, and if you want to like pre-shrink your fabric, there's laundry there to do that. Why 6 walk-in closets? I'm one of those girls that love a lot of clothes and shoes and scarves and handbags and dresses, and it could also store sports equipment for kids, school supplies.
So you just wanted to have a lot of storage?
I want to have a bunch of storage. I love storage.
Just curious because it was brought up. There were other theories were proposed, so I wanted to.
Yeah, that people would live in the closet or something silly.
Wanted to get your statement on the record. Okay, any questions? All right.
Make a comment about the elevator.
Teresa has a question.
What is the height from the main floor, main A, it says 30.69, to the top of the peak? It is not shown on any drawing, and I don't see that anywhere. A bunch of dimensions, but I don't understand why the staff wouldn't ask for that dimension. You really should show the entire set of dimensions.
It's 34 point something feet. It's
no,
measured.
You have 30.69 at main A, and you have at least 10 feet above that.
12.7.
What?
From the floor of point A to the roof.
To the peak.
12.7, right?
From level A to the roof is what you're asking?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm sorry, I was confused.
Stephen.
All be on one sheet.
Well, because I thought they wanted 17 by 11, so I didn't have like a big fold out. So
That's all right. I think we got it cleared up. Stephen has a question.
Yeah, is any of that garden below the main house ADA accessible?
No, just the spa area and the water closet is accessible. But the garden and tending to the garden would require somebody to be able to like use the steps, or else there'd have to be like kind of like Lombard Street kind of layout where it zigzags down.
Okay, thanks.
And ramps.
All right, no more questions.
You want me to?
Go ahead.
I was just wondering why there's an accessory dwelling unit. Is it just how it fits into the idea of the maybe I'm visualizing this incorrectly. How it fits into the multi-generational aspect, or is that like just intended to be like using the space, using all the land space efficiently, so it can like be rented out as an extra rental unit, or is that like part of the multi-generational house?
Rhonda
I'll
can
take
answer that.
one. I'm a home accessibility specialist. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a cold. Multi-generational units ideally should be accessible. I've worked as an occupational therapist for 17 years. most people in this room will either experience a physical disability themselves, take care of a spouse that has a disability, have a child or a grandchild with a disability, or anyway, but the having a home that's accessible for people of all ages and all abilities and all disabilities can be somebody who has a spinal cord injury skiing, somebody who ends up with Parkinson's, someone who ends up with MS. Nobody here knows what life has in store for us. But as an occupational therapist, I know that what life has in store is usually a rather surprising incident of some sort for some family member. And when you have a house that's ready for you, it's unusual and it's awesome. I mean, usually when a patient comes to my rehab facilities, we ask them, do you have stairs? Do you have an accessible bathroom? And they say no, and we are thinking, you might not be going home. You may never go back home. Whereas in a home like this, we would say, wow, okay, all we have to do is rehab you to a certain level, and you're going home. And once you get home, you're going to be able to live independently. Because many people can use a wheelchair. They pedal themselves around. They don't need to be able to walk. They don't need, or you can use a walker. Most homes are not walker accessible. They're not wheelchair accessible. Only about 13% of homes are ready for people to live in them forever. And unfortunately, right now with our society, we have an aging population.
Well, I think he was asking about the ADU.
Yeah,
the accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
So
right.
why is that? Oh,
accessory dwelling unit. I'm sorry. Maybe I accidentally. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've never been good with mics. Sorry, not accessible dwelling unit. Accessory dwelling unit. I wanted to know how that fits into this. Is that
so the multi-generational concept that was summed up in the report by Rex McLean that you could have your in-law living in a bedroom of their own, but most people would prefer their own space. So, they can cook and basically still have their own space, but it would be smaller and more manageable, but then have the support and the emotional, kinship with the rest of the family. But still, when they just need to be introspective and be alone, they can, go and lock everything off and not see anybody for 2 days, So that's basically it. Lets you still be connected, but it still gives you the space necessary to be on your own.
And just from personal experience, my grandmother, my parents were able to buy the house next to theirs for my grandmother to live in, and my aunt was able to find a house in the same walkable neighborhood for my grandparents on my other side. And it's been very important, especially with health scares come up. But they live in Virginia and Kansas, where houses are easy to find and cheap. Here in California, you need to be pretty fortunate to find a house in the same neighborhood and own a fortune in the bank in order to afford it. So an ADU helps greatly with that.
Well, and an ADU being, oftentimes you have two parents, and one will have Parkinson's and one doesn't. So you're bringing in the couple together. One's going to be caring for maybe the father with Parkinson's. Meanwhile, the rest of the family can help out. So having an accessible unit makes it possible for someone to age in place and makes it possible for the other family to.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm unclear on the elevator. Does it hit all levels?
Yes, it's a four-stop elevator.
Okay.
It goes from, it's just a moving basket, so I drew it at the top so you can see it, but it just moves from different stops. And then there was this suggestion to why not move it inside, but then that wouldn't.
Oh, it's outside.
Yeah, it's an outdoor elevator. It's made out of aluminum, and it's engineered by these guys out in Texas to withstand the extreme outdoor humidity of the Florida weather. It's made out of aluminum. It could be powder coated any color you want.
Why is it outside and not inside?
Why is it outside and not inside? Because to fit an elevator inside would cost like $40,000, whereas the outside elevator is like $18,000. And then when it's outside, you can get down to the bottom level D and use the spa and basically carry, your potting soil, your trees and plants that you want to take down to the back, and not, like trudge it through like the house and get soil everywhere, and or go down a hill with rakes and gardening equipment. So it's convenient, and
from a privacy standpoint, it's much better. I know when you have two generations of families living in the same house, think about your own parents all of a sudden moving into your house and showing up every day in the middle of your home. And same for them. They don't want you popping into their space unexpected. The elevator doors open. So if you have an elevator that's directly inside the house, it is more of a privacy issue. Mom just pops up the stairs and you're in the middle of an intimate moment, or you're running around in your underwear. Or if you have it outside, it allows two families, the older generation and the sandwich or the middle generation, to have their own privacy, their own space. And if they come upstairs, then they're going to knock on the door. But they're in the same lot, which makes it easier than driving across town to take care of parents. So.
Okay, let's close the public hearing then. You can sit down. Thank you.
This might be a good opportunity to allow the captioner break for 10
Oh, yeah.
minutes, if you don't mind.
9 o'clock. Yeah, we have to take a break every 2 hours for the captioner so they can rest their fingers, their hardworking fingers. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll have ZAB comments. Okay, thank you.
All right, just wanted to get the facts.
One question.
Yes, Patrick.
That's John. That's Steven. That's Steven.
Okay.
So he's replaced. I don't know who is the guy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we got one John today. We got.
I blended the two because I thought his name was John Erickson.
John Erickson's not here.
Oh, okay. So never
Yeah.
mind. I didn't blend the two. I was completely
Maybe Steven. Steven, who are you subbing for?
Pardon me?
Who are you subbing for?
Charles.
Okay.
It'll be good.
Let's come back. It's after 9:15. You guys are all tardy. All right. So, where were we? We had closed the public hearing, and it is now time for ZAB comments and/or questions for staff, which there always are some more. Who's going to go first?
I'm just going to jump in, and I just look at this project, and it is, I just have to say, it's one of the most bizarre houses I've ever seen, and I cannot imagine that if this house is being made as a luxury home on the market, it would fit the profile of what I'd say, a normal range of people looking for luxury homes. The bedrooms that don't exit into the main part of the house, it's just really a strange arrangement of things that really speaks to me as something that's could easily be a lot of small dorm rooms that go to their own little kitchen area that gets converted out of those other rooms, and it just seems so strange to me. I've been on the zoning board for 5 years. I've never seen anything like this before. So, and I'm kind of shocked that the staff approved it so quickly. That's my comment.
Well, Stephen, I think we should all just check in with ourselves for a minute and remember that whether or not we like the design or we think it's a good design isn't exactly relevant to what we're doing here. But what you said is somewhat relevant. I mean, if you're concerned that it's going to be used for short-term rentals or a dorm, that's legitimate comment.
That's my concern.
I just want to focus our comments.
It easily accommodates that, and if it's sold, what prevents somebody from doing it without anyone knowing it? I mean, that's just my concern. Okay.
Thank you. John.
Okay, I made that comment earlier about rental. It seems to me that this kind of fits the profile for short-term rentals in some ways, the way it's configured. But that's conjecture on our part as well. I'm not sure that we could use that against a project. Maybe we could put conditions in. I'm not sure about that. I don't know that we can even do that. But having said that, I do believe, apropos Stephen here, that this is a poorly conceived project. It seems to me that there's elements that have kind of been fit together without a holistic approach here. I actually believe an architect should actually look at this thing and rework it. There are benefits to having professionals do things professionally, especially if you're sinking a lot of money into something. I don't understand the concept that I can do this myself when you're sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into something and maybe more.
Well, John, can I just interject?
But what I'm saying is I think it's poorly conceived, it's poorly developed as a project, as a house, as a livable entity. I actually think the lift and the elevator should be in the interior, not the exterior. I think there are a lot of elements here that are just wrong. They don't fit together to me. So I have real concerns with this. I am not want to grant multiple use permits as well. I can see the need for one here and there if it really makes the project better, but the applicants are asking for several here. One has been addressed by staff on the 3.5 side. setback. But I'm concerned about the average height. I am concerned about the front 20-foot setback, which is totally ignored. So there are things here I'm concerned about.
Staff addressed that, actually.
The 20-foot? I
Yeah,
know.
it's
Staff
because-
recommended that. I know.
Right, it's because they'd have to construct a whole big thing.
I understand
Okay,
that.
it
I'm
wasn't
still
ignored.
concerned about it.
Fair enough. Matthew.
So, my concerns where I find the project has potential for detriment does come from Airbnb, from the potential use of this is for Airbnb and other short-term rentals, because this property is set up very well to be, whether or not that is the intention of the applicants, I cannot state, but this is intended to be sold property, so even if they don't intend to use it, I think it is quite likely that a smart buyer would use this for Airbnb, and I see potential detrimental issues for that because a short-term rental has a lot of detriments you do not have with long-term renters or a non-renter like elderly people living in the house. There is the fact that they lead to rising rents, among other things. There's also this concern. There's generally concern about safety and just wildness issues sometimes with short-term rentals. And when there's this concern that like people can see into like all of an adjacent properties site, including children's bedrooms and bathrooms, when these are people who if they are short-term renters, are not necessarily invested in the community, that is a bit concerning to me that they can. That random strangers can just peer into a child's bedroom does give me concern. But also, as I mentioned, there's the rising rents. If there is behavioral issues, it's harder to hold short-term renters accountable. I also have the concerns because, and I will not, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm an undergrad, I will say that this is not my legal opinion, but Airbnb alleges that like the Telecommunications Decency Act means that like cities such as Berkeley cannot hold them accountable for illegal listings. So, for instance, if like these were converted into illegal rentals, which I am not into illegal short-term rentals, for instance, a lot of the actors involved couldn't be held accountable, and so that gives me concern about a very high potential for detriment. That there's a way for this to happen without those things. I also have a lot of the concerns that this project has concerns about whether I have concerns of that it's not properly designed. I don't know whether or not those really are grounds for us to reject this application, but I do think my concerns about detriment, and also I have some other concerns about detriment, I think, as well, are there. If this were a proposed development where the applicants intended to live in the house with like elderly relatives, and this were a custom-built house, I think potentially some of my concerns about this potentially being converted into Airbnb the upper floors might be mitigated for just a custom design for like a specific family, but that's not the case. The intention is to sell this property, and regardless of the intentions of the applicant, I cannot speak to how a buyer would. From my taking economics classes, you always go for the most, whatever will get you the most revenue, and so the potential whoever buys this property, for them it's going to be short-term rentals. And I think that the most concerning is that because the city right now has this model of if somebody is present on the property, there is not a 90-day limit for how long you can short-term rental things. So what I could see is the upper floor converted entirely into apartments, and they're not going to be rented out long-term. They're going to be rented out short-term, and because they don't have that 90-day limit, that means that this will not be used for elder care, for allowing older residents or folks who need a long-term place to stay and are not older. I can see it very much being used as these short-term rentals, and that's not what we need in Berkeley. We need long-term housing supply. This is a plot of land that I think can really be used for to increase our long-term housing supply. But as this project is conceived, I have concern that it won't do that, and will also have those detriments I mentioned, such as privacy, and privacy I think is related to safety inherently, and also just about other issues that have to do with short-term renters as well. And so those are my deep concerns about this project. And I do hope that maybe this project can be redesigned in a better way, but I don't know that at this time I can support this project.
I'm just going to, I'm going to make a comment to respond to that, and then others. So Matt, I had the same point that Matthew made, which is that my understanding of the new short-term rental law is that it would in fact be legal, 100% legal for whoever ends up owning this house to, as long as they lived on the premises, to rent out all the bedrooms. So, you know, we always have to be careful and that not to allow perceived intent to influence our decision, because, you know, and they've actually said that they're going to sell it, so this isn't so much of an issue. But we have to assume that anything could happen to this property if we grant the use permit, regardless of what the applicant says. So I think it's fair to assume it's possible that that would happen. And I would suggest to the board the most useful response would be to think of proposed conditions that would minimize the possibility of that. I also want to point out that that's true for any house. Any new construction that we approve could be rented on Airbnb. That's just a fact of life here. So, but this one, I agree, is seems especially conducive to that. So I just wanted to remember, everybody just remember, intent is irrelevant. It's the possibilities. Anything could happen with this property. We'll just have to do our job to make sure and steer it, the likelihood, in the right direction. That's all I wanted to say. Salva. Okay, you're next.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Shoshana. Along that line of thinking, so the number of AUPs, I heard a number of concerns. I appreciate the amount of thought that has gone into this project by both the applicant and the community members and staff. Number of AUPs doesn't necessarily concern me. I mean, this is a really challenging site. It's the reason, you know, the ZAB and staff exist to think about tricky sites like this. The use, again, we can't really control exactly what happens or who, if the property gets sold. You know, any number of houses get sold after their original owners or developers build them and sell them. Many of us live in homes that we ourselves did not build. So that alone is not a reason to oppose the project for me. Again, the number of units is not necessarily, the fact that it contains an accessory dwelling unit is not necessarily a reason to oppose that, because that really, it does add to stability of the eventual homeowner that they're able to age in place. I do buy that argument. And this is an expensive place to live in. It's more likely we'll have a situation where kids are moving back home or parents are aging in place. So none of those concerns by itself are reasons for me to oppose it. However, I agree that it is a very unusual and design and a little bit awkward, perhaps. And I don't have the same type of urgency regarding approving and ensuring that this type of housing be created, because it is not in a particularly transit accessible area. It's not where the city of Berkeley globally should be developing new and more housing, because downtown transit accessible corridors is really where I sense there's a much greater need and demand for new housing. So that's sort of comments and not quite getting to a conclusion there, but that's
all right. Teresa's next.
So I had two questions of staff. One is, could you tell me the purpose of the restriction on the 26 feet of pavement width for an ADU?
Do you mean the restriction or the?
It says
it's a requirement to do it.
Construct an accessory dwelling unit on a lot with access from a street less than with less than 26 feet of pavement width. So in other words, they need an AUP to construct an ADU on a property with less than 26 feet of pavement width. So what is the purpose of that restriction?
You mean the fact that the
Reason
city's...
you need an ADU
No,
or
I-
an AUP?
Hang on. So the fire code says if you're going to add new dwelling units, they want to have a minimum pavement width for fire access. And the city to the property with fire equipment. The road's too narrow, they can't get their equipment up there. So this is a standard that applies if any portion of the pavement on this street all the way down to where the road gets wide enough is less than 26 feet, even if it's only for a few feet, then the whole street needs an AUP if they want to put in an ADU. So it's a safety thing.
So why isn't it also for the main unit?
That section doesn't apply
It only applies
when
for
there's an ADU. Yeah, and the standard used to be 20 feet, but when the city revised the rules a couple years ago...
So the fire access applies to the main house too.
Yeah, and the remedy there is that they put in, well, let me not say it that way. They need to sprinkler the building.
Well, all new dwelling units need to be sprinklered. right?
Anywhere.
Yes, the
Oh,
new code
okay.
requires that. So, okay, so that's the reasoning for that. Okay. And then on an ADU, do we still have the requirement that it be owner occupied?
Same.
It still needs to be
If it's under the old
owner-occupied.
rules, I'm not sure if the state rules have preempted us on
Okay.
that.
I can't remember.
Good.
Okay, so anyway, the way I look at this is, you look at the use permits. I think we all agree it's okay to build a single-family unit on this property. And I think it's acceptable to build an accessory dwelling unit. However, I do not think that the administrative use permit to go above the 28 feet in average height is justified in this case, mostly because of the way the building is designed. I do not feel that the design has tried to minimize that. To me, there's not a real good reason for them to, go past that 28 feet. They could achieve that with, and get the same, single-family home unit and an accessory dwelling unit without going over that 28 feet. So I don't feel in this case they've made the case to go above the 28 feet. The second problem is the front yard reduction. So, yeah, they need to have the parking at the top of the hill. That makes sense. And then the traffic engineer has said, yeah, that's a better way to do it. But they have not made the smallest impact they could have with that front yard in position. So I would argue that they need to make the most minimal impact in the front yard. Yes, you want to put 2 cars there, but because the neighbors are going to want the parking. I mean, I wouldn't want us to reduce the parking in this situation, even though it's allowable, because the front yard, it's a good spot for the parking in this case, in this special circumstance of this particular lot on this campus drive, the way it's situated. I think that's acceptable. But again, the impact then needs to be minimized. So everything that's within that setback needs to be minimized. And right now, they haven't done that. They've added a bunch of other stuff in that front yard. So I would say that that's not acceptable for approval. The other section is the wheelchair ramp in the side yard. Again, sure, it's nice to have a wheelchair ramp, but it doesn't have to impose into the side yard setback. You could have had the wheelchair ramp and not imposed into the side yard setback. So I don't think that one is acceptable either, because there's not a justification for it. The design could accommodate it without doing that. And one of the reasons I think a lot of these things could be accommodated is the design is very inefficient. And that's been pointed out by an architect who spoke against it. And to me, it's obvious as a person with architectural training and an architecture degree that the design of the property is quite inefficient and a lot of wasted space. So that's another reason why, I feel if this was a very efficient, compact, and they still needed to ask for a wheelchair ramp on the side yard, that would be acceptable, because it would be like the only solution you could provide. So, but in this case, I feel like it's not. And no one's really talked about the hot tub, but I don't know why it should be unenclosed. I mean, they've already done all these other things. There's no reason why they couldn't enclose it. So again, it's like over and over they're asking for something, but I don't feel that, I mean, I don't really care about that one in particular, but again, it's not really justified. With all the volume you have in this building, you could easily enclose the hot tub by pushing it in. The other, and the problem with the height is the way the height, you know, and Greg has explained it to us, that the height is, you know, meets whatever, it's over the height. But if you look at the actual bulk of the building and the height that's perceived, it's over 40 feet. And that's just too much. If the building stepped down as it went down the hill, I think it would be much more acceptable. You would come off the building, you know, come off the street. You would reduce as much as possible the impact of the height here, and you'd step it down. They have a very bulk, they have not tried to reduce the bulk of the building in that way. So by, you know, creating this, in essence, the perceived maximum is 40 feet. And, you know, that is out of character. So I think we could argue that that is out of character. And I think the problems, you know, I think you could still get a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house with an ADU on this lot. And just, it needs to be designed a little more carefully, and I think it would be an acceptable design. I think there are a lot of red flags that we've seen with the design, but, you know, and those could be, you know, we could be projecting some use of the building, but I think, you know, a well-designed 4-bedroom and an ADU, is it a 2-bedroom or 1-bedroom? I can't remember. But I think you could design it and get a really nice design and reduce the bulk of the building, reduce the height and the impact on the street. And I think it could still be a good project. But the way it's designed now, I can't approve it. Brazil?
Well, I don't know if it's because we both are last name Clark, but you basically said everything that I wanted to say in the order that I wanted to say it. I had all of the same, go Clark, I had all of the same questions and comments in that I like the intent of the project, but I just don't feel as if it fits the character of the neighborhood that you're trying to place it in with the design that you have currently. I went through the use permit list, and yeah, we should construct a new single-family dwelling on this lot with the emphasis on family. I don't see a lot of family-oriented rooms on each level when you talk about living multi-generationally and having that space to interact as a family. I see where you've designed it so that a lot of the levels can be separated. And then I went to look at the height, and my question for staff is, what is the height of the accessory dwelling unit proposed? Because in section, when they said the hillside overlay district provisions, it says no more than 12 feet high for that one. So I was looking to see what was the height of that.
I think that would be if it was a separate dwelling, if it was a separate building from the main. Now, this one's incorporated into the main building, so that wouldn't apply. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that answered my question there. But for the side yard setback and for the street less than 26 feet, I had made a note about fire access, you know. And so that was my concern there. And so when you spoke about that, that answered my question. And I also had a question for why the unenclosed hot tub. It wasn't a big flag, but that's why I asked, does the elevator go down to that floor? If this is for, you know, someone who needs therapy, I see that you have a large bathroom on level C. Would there be, you know, a jet spa there for someone who is elderly or ailing? So why the unenclosed hot tub? So I had a lot of questions there and comments that were related to Teresa, and I just don't see in your design the need for a lot of these use permits, and I think that your project would be benefited by someone, an architect or a professional who could design for the area that you have, the space that you're trying to accommodate. I see where you've tried to really maximize the space here, but it doesn't, for safety concerns, fire access, characterization of the neighborhood, it doesn't fit well in this neighborhood. So I'm not inclined to approve a lot of the use permits that have been asked for.
Patrick?
Would the applicants like to come up front? I feel like you're kind of way out there, and we really want to engage you. I mean, we should ideally be at a round table, but
Well, just, okay.
I mean,
We're not asking
you don't
you
have to, but just if you're comfortable, please.
Come
I'm just inviting them to
All right,
join
sure.
us. That's all. Thanks.
But we
And-
still have a closed public hearing. just
Yes.
to-
First of all, you know, the detail to which you've gone to design this is impressive and admirable, and if, for whatever the reasons are, the goals of aging in place and multi-generational and accessibility are all noble goals in their own right, without questioning any motives that might underlie it. And I think I can speak for all of us to say we're all for that. That isn't the issue. The biggest single issue is the bigness. It's wildly out of scale with the fabric of the neighborhood. I know this neighborhood very well. I've lived in Berkeley all my life. I've been practicing architecture for 40 years. And I've also designed very similar sites, challenging hillside sites with neighbors. And I can say that, I think the concerns and comments you've heard from the board as well as neighbors, it's in your interest to listen to those and not simply rebut them. Because, for instance, the architect across the street, I think, gave you a lot of very valuable advice. And if you say you're building to sell, well, you're concerned with marketing. And I have designed for clients in exactly the same position. And the issue of privacy is also a huge one. You're an infill lot going in between existing dwellings. It's in your best interest and your buyer's best interest to be concerned about privacy, because it goes both ways. The buyer may not want a hot tub that's fully exposed. The buyer may not want a view into the neighbor's bathroom or bedroom or any of the living spaces. You tend to engage with your neighbors in a way that mutually respects privacy, because you're only 8 feet away from each other potentially, and that's without any side yard exceptions. So and if you look at the pattern of what's been built, and it's all around you. You don't have to go far. Well, you can go right next door to where you're building. There is a pattern to building on the hillsides. And for instance, on a downslope lot, which is how this is being developed, by the way, that was very good advice at the beginning by engineering to develop from the top rather than the bottom. That saved you a lot of money, and certainly opened up the possibilities in a way that would be more restricted. But more typically, a driveway slopes down on a steep site, because in order to comply with the height requirement, you typically need to move the building further downslope in order to not have extreme cuts and retaining walls. So it's not just a setback for a setback's sake. It actually makes a lot of sense, because that gives you space to actually transition to a lower level rather than, as you've proposed, a higher level.
I haven't proposed a higher level.
That wasn't a question.
Yeah, the time for you to testify is over, actually.
Okay. Well, yes, the main floor is higher than the road. The driveway slopes up, if I'm reading drawings correctly. You've also been advised to engage an architect. And this is not my purview, but I would certainly support that, because what this plan shows is kind of a lack of editing. And a lot of ideas are there, a lot of good ones, but there's a process of editing where you simplify, you rationalize, you economize on circulation. The plan is convoluted, it's over-circulated. So you're spending a lot of money just on space that's not really usable space. And all these factors, I mean, I'm saying this to you as a speculative developer, because, potential buyers are going to look at this and they're going to, I think they're going to be concerned that, and I'm just suggesting you really think about, well, who is your market, and does this make sense for the market? But that has no bearing on my decision or our decision as a board. And however, I think it's clearly a detriment to the neighborhood, in my opinion, by virtue of overly scaled, violations of privacy. Well, not violations, it's not a violation, just lack of respect for privacy of neighbors. And if it helps the view situation with what I think would be no or minimal sacrifice on your part, then it'd be good to do so. And much better to go into a project, engaging the neighbors, and going through a process where you're welcomed to the neighborhood rather than fighting your way in. And I'd urge you to engage in that process, step back, kind of rethink it, take everything that's been said, and continue on. And I think that will be my inclination is to urge a continuance of this project so you can take the time to do the work that needs to be done.
Is that a motion?
I motion to continue. Yes.
I will second, and that's not time specific, I take it.
No, because it may take some time.
I agree.
I'll
second.
I would like to comment that many of the comments that were very clearly articulated by Teresa should be incorporated into that second.
Yeah, I just want 2 points quickly is I'm not an architect, but as someone who does specialize in certain things, like I specialize in like internal policy governance, and so when I work in the student government, I've sometimes seen senators come up with ideas that they want to do that amends our ASUC bylaws, and sometimes the ideas are bad, and they should just not be done. I don't think that's not the metaphor for you all. I think this seems to be a good thing. It's well-intentioned, I think, and it is also, I think, has good ideas. But when they don't engage I guess in this case it's a pseudo-professional, like our ASUC's chief legal officer, who is a student who knows how to write legalese, it winds up with lots of errors. It will wind up with sometimes just creating more problems than they're hoping to fix. And so I think engaging an architect is engaging that professional is really important for getting. I think the metaphor of editing is really good because you can have the ideas, but you don't necessarily. But it's the editing, it's the sanding off of the rough edges that really makes the difference about how successful something can be, and it can make it even better. A professional can help bring your vision to life even better than you thought it can be, and it can make it come to life. The other thing is, when this does come back to the board, I guess since it's a continuance, I would really hope that the issues around Airbnb use potentially are also incorporated into changes, so that is not a concern, and that I think I probably won't be on the board when it comes back, but I think I personally might be okay with with some places being rented, but that doesn't fit into, I think, the vision of this project. So if this is entirely intended to be like a multi-generational, I think that things such as maybe moving the elevator into the inside, maybe the laundry room, maybe there don't need to be so many laundry rooms, or just, I think those design changes to address concerns about short-term rental use would be very helpful in alleviating concerns about potential detriment, and making making it so that the board could find a not in detriment finding.
I'll make my comments. So the one thing that people have sort of said, but not explicitly, is there's something off here, I think, that's bothering everyone. And it's, my attempt at articulating it is that, you know, in your initial presentation, you're telling a very specific story, you have a very specific vision about how this house is going to be used, and it's designed all around this very specific narrative. But there's no buyer in mind. It's like you're just going to make this, it's for this particular family, and it needs to be wheelchair accessible, and there's the grandparents, and they all live there, and yeah, we're going to put it on the market and see who buys it. That's odd. I think that's sitting strangely with all of us. You know, it would make sense if you had a client who had asked for these 5 things, and that's what they wanted, but that's not the case. So I think that's what's making us uncomfortable. And then I really want to echo Teresa's point that, you know, if it had been that, but you were asking for something that was well within the zoning code, we would probably just grant it, because whatever that's your right to make a building and that may or may not be marketable and sell it. That's none of our business as long as it meets the zoning code. But because you're asking for all these exceptions and the justification isn't clear and the narrative that you're providing isn't really adding up, it makes us not want to grant those exceptions. I think that's a version of what other people are saying, and that's certainly how I feel. So, and I think the biggest one is the height, which is really a stand-in for the massing. If the massing was less, then the average height would be less. And you know, I also am very familiar with this neighborhood. I actually grew up very close to this house, and my parents still live in that house. And there are a number of houses that have way out of place massing. I mean, they do get built, and they do exist. So you could say it's in character with the neighborhood because of these 5 houses. But honestly, those 5 houses are awful. There's one up the street from my parents' house that was built about 20 years ago, and they call it the Embassy, because it's so obnoxious when you go by it. And I mean, and that's I've seen that, and I think this one has the potential to be just way out of character with the neighborhood, and it would be especially visible on the lower street, Del Mar, whatever it's called. I think it would be kind of jarring to see it standing out so much. So I'm definitely reluctant. I would be reluctant to grant the height exception for that reason. And similarly, the other ones, the justification you're asking for is just not clear. So I wouldn't, if we were asking to approve it or deny it, I would not be comfortable approving it. But the motion is to continue, and I will support that motion. I think it's a good idea.
I have a comment. I mean, I'm not sure if, you know, a continuation to me would mean, I mean, this project needs a lot of redesign. I guess if the applicant is willing to continue and to really redesign it and not just come back with a few adjustments, I'm okay with it. But I do not want to waste staff's time or the board's time if the applicant's not willing to really, you know, take into the consideration that this really does need a professional to design it. You do have some great ideas, and I think a multi-generational design is a wonderful idea, and also the accessible aspects. Maybe it's not the best site, but I think it can work if you're willing to spend the money on the elevator and the things like that. But again, I feel like continuing, I don't want to, you know, again, if I would like the applicant to speak to that, because I think for us to continue, otherwise I think we should reject it. So those are the 2 options. Continue it if we feel that's something you really, because we don't want to have you pay extra money to come back, you know, but if you really think that's going to, you know, that you feel you want to redesign it and come back, yeah, I mean, I guess continuing it gives you that option. You can always withdraw it if you decide not to, but I would just be concerned. I don't want it to come back to us with really minor revisions. I mean, I think the revisions need to be, they're pretty major.
Let's make a list. I have a sketch of one. I mean, we have some very specific suggestions.
Yeah.
So these are suggestions that you really should follow, I think is what Teresa's saying.
May I make another comment before you go to that? Well, I think this is kind of precursor to some of what may be said, and it underscores what Teresa has said. I would not, because I don't see the justification or rationale for them, I would not support the height exception, the front yard setback, or the side yard setback exceptions. Just to be clear, I will not support those unless there is clearly a good reason. But I think that will take some work to convince us that there is.
And, you know, Teresa made a good point that if the project had been very efficiently designed and still clearly needed that small setback, then I think we would be open to granting it. But it would have to be very designed.
If it was open, and again, you would try to minimize the impact of that setback, because I think it can work. It doesn't have to go downhill. I mean, I think it can be a straight-in carport or whatever, but I think you just want to minimize that impact rather than have it so bulky.
My advice, and I don't know how feasible this is because this is, to me, feels like a very custom project. When you all came, before John asked if you all intended to live in the house or buy it, live in the house or selling it, I had assumed by default that because this is such a custom property, that this was being intended for you two to live in with, like, elderly parents or other relatives. And so I was very surprised to hear that wasn't the case. And with a custom project like this, and this isn't like buying it, this is me just giving advice. I would recommend, to the extent you're able to try to find maybe a client before you move forward, before you come back with the next proposal, because, you know, you could have a client who, like, you know, there could be a potential buyer who this property would work if only a few things had been different. You know, maybe their parent, you know, maybe for whatever like they need just some changes. And I would really hate to see this parcel of land be used to build something that isn't able to sell, and also you unable to sell it, or unable to sell it for as much as you would like to because you don't have. So that may not be feasible, but I would just recommend trying to find a potential buyer and working with them to craft the specifics of this house. And maybe that requires just minor revisions. Maybe it requires a bit more than that, but that is just my advice, is that this feels like a very custom property. And I think that working with someone specific, you know, if there's a specific client, I think that also can allay some concerns, such as, you know, who is the mystery buyer going to be that will potentially turn this into Airbnb, for instance, or that way, you know, we see that there is a specific group of people. This is how they intend to use it. I think it's just good advice from a business perspective, but also to make sure that some of our concerns might be allayed. So yeah.
So I have 5 things that I have highlighted. Please add more if you think of them. The first, this is advice, and once again, this is advice that you are strongly urged to take in your redesign. You either design it within the code, or if you do need any small exceptions, you really need to show us in your design that they're really justified, and you really need to be asking for them. Okay, and that's specifically the height exception and the front and side setbacks. Privacy, we haven't really heard a satisfactory explanation for the privacy concerns, so in your redesign, just make it super clear that
the privacy of the neighbors is not being violated. So there's no place on the deck where you can look into anyone's bedroom, for instance. Bring down the bulk, make it step down the way that other houses do in the neighborhood, and not stick out so much. And I think I think you'll have to do that in order to fit under the height requirement. Make it more, this is what I wrote, make it more cohesive as a design so that it makes more sense to imagine a family living there. Because I think the lack of, the kind of odd design is what's giving us all pause and imagining maybe it won't be so attractive for a family, and it will be attractive for a buyer who wants to do something else with it. So the more family appealing you make the design, I think the better you'll be. And lastly, there hasn't been too much discussion on this, I think, because there's nothing really to say, but I have a big question mark on the views issue. I think that the view, I went up there today, it's a beautiful view of the bay, and that's a protected view. And if the the uphill neighbor's view is being impacted, I think that's significant. And I would like, maybe this is also a request from staff, I would like to see more documentation. I guess you're not going to put the story poles back up, but if there could be more documentation on exactly what the impact of that view is, that would be really helpful.
We would need a section, where I would request a section cut from the upper, the street, showing the upper property. I mean, that's a normal thing we would have been provided.
And
if
if
an
that
architect had designed this, they would have provided us that to show how the view corridor was working.
I'm concerned about that, and I would like to see visual evidence, and I would encourage the the uphill neighbor to, was it you, sir? Yeah. So if you could cooperate with them and, maybe let them stand in your living room and take a picture and then use that. Right. Yeah, that would be really helpful because we are concerned about your view, and we want to make sure, and any redesign would have to minimize the impact.
If anyone did photos while the story poles were up that would illustrate the actual impact of the views, that would be extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we're hoping for a redesign of less bulkiness, so perhaps it'll be different. But those are the 5 things.
There is one more that was mentioned at least a couple times, which I agree with, the unenclosed hot tub.
Okay.
I didn't see a justification for that. I don't understand it.
And I think that falls into the privacy issue.
And it is privacy, you're right. But
yeah,
specifically, I didn't understand that.
Right. If you're going to ask for that AUP, you need to it needs to be clear why, or just don't ask for it.
Yeah.
Is that it? And is that, I mean, as the motion maker, Patrick, are you okay with all that? Do you, like, that's kind of part of the motion?
Yes.
And I think a lot of these are suggestions. I mean,
right.
Everything we said, you're going to have to think about, and this is taped, so you can watch it again if you want. Mm-hmm. Each person here has a slightly different, limit of what they can, want to see. But I think, those are that gives you. I don't think those have to be conditions necessarily, but those are really more recommendations to the applicant. I don't know if we need to put those in the motion.
Okay, fair enough.
I actually agree because a lot of it is more in the nature of advice, and I think it's well-intentioned advice, and I think it's given in a spirit that I believe will ultimately benefit you and your potential buyer as well as the neighbors mutually. So I think you can really look at it from that perspective rather than a for or against. And most of what we have said is advice, and the only leverage we have is the ability to deny use permits in connection with this project. And so if we feel that the advice isn't being taken and acted on, then that's our leverage.
Okay, well said. Any further comments? We take a vote on the motion to continue off calendar?
Sure. You want to do roll call?
Yeah.
Board Member Hauser.
This is for the motion that, yes, to continue.
The motion is to continue this off calendar.
Yeah, yes.
Redesign for all the reasons stated tonight.
For all the reasons and recommendations stated, yes.
Thank you. Board
Yes.
Member Sheehan.
Yes.
Board Member Simon Weisberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Board Member Brazil Clark.
Yes.
Board Member Salowski.
Yes.
Board Member Donaldson.
Yes.
Board Member Teresa Clark.
Yes.
Chair O'Keefe.
Chief O'Keefe. Yes. Come on. All right. So we look forward to seeing you again, applicant. Look forward to having you back. And thank you for your time. Thank you, public, for coming as well.
I think it's fine.
All right, we've got one more, guys.
Do we know what's causing that noise and how to turn it off? Because it's still there.
It's the radiation we're suffering.
Oh, right. From the towers.
Wait, is it actually that? Like, I've been kind of wondering.
I don't know.
No, we don't know what it is.
Yeah. Okay, I thought like, the first thing I thought literally was, did that guy come back with that thing? Yeah. He's just standing here
representing the applicant?
outside the window.
It could be, you know, the police
Are you representing John?
Okay, cool. I was worried the caption wasn't getting his. So coming up, we're not taking a break, you guys. Sit down.
You're presenting,
And then we're presenting.
As the applicant.
So we're gonna have 908 Cedar up next. Is okay. Hi. Staff is ready.
I'm ready.
Kenny, are you doing this one too? Was Greg doing it?
Yeah, I'm doing it on the behalf of someone that was unable to attend.
Was it Leslie, right?
Yes.
Aw, why couldn't she come? I love her.
So
Okay, so Greg, let's hear the staff report. And
it's going to be fantastic.
Okay, I can't wait.
So what we have here is a use permit for 908 Cedar. Demolish the existing single-family residence and build 2 new single-family dwellings. It's in the R1A district. As the board knows, often these are controversial, and I think that there has been a little bit of comment, but maybe not as much as we normally see. It needs a use permit to demolish the existing building, build 2 new dwelling units, and then there's a rear yard reduction, which is also rather common. This board saw this last December, and I think at that time there was some recommendations to change things, and so hopefully they've been responsive. I noticed in the plans, if you look at, sorry, not the plans, but in the staff report, sheets 4 and 5 show prior extent of the buildings. We think it's gotten better, and it's in line with what they've done on their other projects on 10th Street recently, sort of just changed the design. Our recommendation is to approve, which I believe is what we recommended before, in an interest of brevity.
And which is the preferred alternative from the applicant?
15-foot rear yard setback. So that's,
15
I think,
feet rear
option
yard
one.
setback
Yeah.
is the preferred option by the applicant.
And that's a little bit confusing. It's listed as 13 and a half. Maybe
Well-
that is the truth, because what that's counting is the pop out on the second story. So the whole
I got
first
it.
floor is 15-foot rear yard, but there is a pop out on the second floor.
And that's because the pop-out doesn't comply with our allowable projections into yards, so the setback has to be measured to that wall.
It's a bay,
But the bay has to be 25% of the wall width, and it's
and
not.
it's more.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm done.
So staff is recommending the same, right? The 13.2 or 15, however you want to look at it.
And our recommendation, it's on page,
Yes,
excuse me,
yes.
you just want me to say yes?
No, I
Option-
did see it.
it's
but
option
I'm-
1 is the
just
one
so
we're
I'm
recommending.
clear. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Questions for staff? All right, applicants, you want to give 5-minute presentation?
Okay.
Sorry, one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, one question.
The required setback is 20 feet, correct? Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So do we get 5 minutes?
you get 5. They're fixing it.
If you need it, do you need 5?
We might.
You don't have to
There's
take
a
the whole
few of
thing,
us.
but let's
Okay,
hear it. Let's hear what you have to say.
we can,
You're entitled to
yeah,
5.
Maybe we
Any-
won't take it off.
Opposition, you have a chance to rebut.
Okay.
You know, there's new board members here, so don't assume everyone here knows everything about the project. Some of us were here, but not everyone was, so I would recommend you take your full 5 minutes so that our discussion later could be really short.
Oh, by the way, we have only 2 cards, and they're both in support.
Yeah, I was good.
So, just know
Okay,
that.
great. So that's fantastic. Let's see. So in short, our project started out already 10 feet below the maximum height limit. So 2-story, 2 dwellings, 2 2-stories. And so they were already pretty close, but mainly ZAB was concerned with the 20-foot rear yard setback and the neighbors to the west being shadowed by the bulkiness of the 2 buildings. So what we've done is we have, like the other 9th Street project, flipped the front unit to move our house another 8.5 feet away from the neighbors to the right, which I think has done quite a bit. You can see our previous design, the shadow is shown in yellow.
And so the new design, you can see, doesn't shadow their kitchen window, which is really important for their morning sunlight. Let's see. So yeah, there's two of those that just show kind of how dramatically that changed the shadow effect. And then this one has to do with the 15-foot rear yard setback versus 20-foot. So it had been suggested that it might be better for shadow with the 20-foot, but we think it's better with the 15-foot because the yellow indicates what it would be with the 20-foot yard setback, and the regular shadow is what it would be with the 15-foot. And from a personal perspective of the clients, it greatly reduces the rear yard for the front house on our project, so it's a lot better. So that's the architectural bits, and then I'm going to let the owners speak about it.
And just to piggyback on the shadowing, we've been working.
Can you use the mic? Speak. Comment
We've
forward.
been working with our neighbors from the beginning. We purchased this property over a year, about a year and 4 months ago. We were at the ZAB meeting in December. Between the time we purchased the property and December, we worked with the neighbors, but because of ZAB's recommendations, we worked even more closely with them, especially the neighbors right next to us who are living there and will occupy, the shadowing will affect them. So we've been hand in hand with them, and, we're all getting along, as you guys can see, so.
I mean, in terms of just our personal, I can bring the personal touch to it, aside from I think Alana and Sepida touched upon the architectural aspects of it, and us being sort of cohesive with our neighbors and taking your recommendations and really working with them to see what they're comfortable with and what works with our designs, and not only with our neighbor next door, but also across the street as well, too. I can speak for Sepida. This is we're first-time homeowners, and this is our, we've always loved this neighborhood, and we want to live here and build a family here and sort of have our lives here and settled here. So, having a good relationship with our neighbors and having them be on board with what we're going to be building is very important to us. So we did take that 4 months from when we had our original ZAB meeting to now, and really working with them and just back and forth, and with our architect as well, too. And, and we did take the time. We're investing some more money into it to sort of change the designs of things, and just hope that you guys are okay with it, approve it, and allow us to be part of the Berkeley community.
I just want to say one more thing. As you can see, these are 2 single-family homes. There's a shortage of single-family homes in not only Berkeley and all of the Bay Area. We're both renters right now. We've hopped around from apartment to apartment. And this is something that I feel like not only for us will benefit, but in the future, if Berkeley wants to keep residents and not provide a transient community, single-family homes like this should be built. So.
Okay. Thank you. That was like chicken soup for the ZAB soul.
Yeah.
John, question for the applicant?
Just questions, comments?
Well, right now, do you have a question for the applicant? We have cards too. Yeah.
Do we have cards?
Well, we have
okay.
Annette and Julia.
Okay.
Is that you guys, or is that? Okay, so yeah, we have people who want to speak. But do you have a question for the applicant?
No.
Okay, thank you. You guys can come back up after the public comment if you want. So Annette. I'll give you 3 minutes.
Oh, I won't need it.
Okay.
Basically, I just want to say that, well, I live at 904 Cedar Street, where the house that's just to the west. There was a big concern with the shading on our house, but considering the changes that they've made, my husband and I agree that we accept it and we support the solution that they're putting forward. And we also look forward to having these guys as our neighbors.
This is like, I made the joke before, but I mean it. This is beautiful.
Shoshana, do you need a tissue?
You'd be amazed how rarely we hear this. Julia.
I'm Julie Greer, and I'm at 911 Cedar. I'm across the street, and I should probably just say ditto and let everybody go home. I'm really excited to have these women move in as well. I have 3 children, 12, 9, and 3 years old, and for a long time now, this property across the street has been vacant. It's been tagged. It's had grass grown higher than my head. It's had a series of squatters living in it. It has not felt safe for my family. It's certainly visually not been something that I like to get up with my morning coffee and walk out my front door and see. And so these women have been knocking on my door with their plans regularly, showing me their changes, showing me what they're doing, inviting my comment, inviting my opinions. They've been so wonderful through this whole process, and I've been so excited about this project. The one thing that I do want to address, because I understand that a neighbor may have at the last ZAB meeting expressed concern about views, given the 2 stories that the homes are going to be. This neighbor lives directly to my right, so it's across the street from them. And Cedar Street is wide enough that a 2-story building across the street from us is not going to impact our views at all. And looking south from our homes on Cedar Street, there's nothing to see anyway. But it's not going to affect the views. And I would also say that my neighbor has built 6-7-foot fences in front of his house, and they're apparently grandfathered in. I'm not complaining about the height of fences. I have no issue with them. But he has also put a lot of bamboo there as another visual. So he can't see anything anyway. That's what I'm saying. He literally cannot see out anything from the front of his house except for his own fence and his own bamboo. So I have no issue with that, but any complaints about the views are not really well seated, I guess I would say. So I'm really excited about the project, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. And I'd like to point out, I'm just double checking, I don't think that neighbor wrote a letter, nor is he here, so, right, we don't have to worry about his objection, yeah. If he could have, he was welcome to come.
First time around, there was a letter written, and like I said, we've worked with every neighbor, so we also worked with him, and we emailed him, invited him to the meeting. Unfortunately, he couldn't come, but he's well aware of all these stuff. So.
Good, yeah, like I said, if he still had the concern, he'd be here, and he's not, so I guess he doesn't have it. Great. All right, do you want to say anything else?
We didn't say the names.
Applicants, you get a rebuttal to all those. You can rebut all those comments.
We just want to piggyback, what I said in terms of single-family homes are important for people like us, for first-time home owners, and there's just so many apartments in Berkeley, and there's concern about overpopulation, but these apartments are doing that and just causing Airbnbs, renters, short-term type living situations where people will eventually move out when they have families. So I think that approving this project sets a very good precedence for the city of Berkeley.
Great. Anything else?
Question for the applicant.
Question.
Did you do a signature sheet with adjacent, abutting, confronting neighbors? Oh, I didn't see that in the packet. Okay.
Yeah, it was in the beginning one.
Okay, but not in this one. Okay. Well, that's great. So I'm curious about the neighbor to the south. Has that neighbor?
The neighbor to the south is across the street, so I think you're pretty much directly to the
South. Oh, am I mixed up? Let's see.
I'm a little. Am I north? I have it backwards.
Then it would be.
Directly behind us. Directly behind us is a side lot, so they're actually off of.
It's addressed off 7th.
Yeah.
That's the one with the apartment building next door?
Oh, that's an apartment?
Don't you have like a, oh, no.
No. I don't think so. It's a one-story, it's sprawling, and I remember I've knocked on their door multiple times and never had a response, and we sent them certified mail.
Okay. Well, my one comment, it's sort of multiple comments rolled into one, is...
Are we doing comments?
Yeah, okay, well, you ladies can sit down, we'll close the public hearing, and then do ZAB comments, and that'll be the appropriate order of things, so please go ahead.
Well, it's great that you've done all the work you have in soliciting neighbors' comments and obviously getting support from some of them. But there is an underlying reason for irrespective of that, for rear yard setbacks, and that is to preserve open space within the middle of a block. And you will enjoy that as well as your other neighbors. So actually, this is a question I have for you. I'm not sure why you didn't move the front house further towards Cedar, perhaps more, and because the dominant pattern of development has less of a setback than you've proposed.
I think we're right up at the front setback.
Well, as shown in the block plan, most of the houses on that block, right, they aren't conforming, but did you consider moving closer to the street?
I'd like to address that. That would require a variance. If they're at the 20-foot limit, there's no allowances to join the neighbors, unfortunately.
Are you 20 feet?
Yeah.
Can't you average
I wish.
neighbors?
No, it's a hard line, and unfortunately, most of the zoning districts set a setback that is not attained by any building, generally.
Okay, so that takes a variance rather than an AUP.
Yes.
Whereas the rear yard setback is an AUP.
Mm-hmm.
But not the front yard. Okay.
Yeah, and the rear yard setback was set up as a reduction to facilitate second units if that was a constraint, and also, I think, to allow break between the buildings.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And staff is no way happy about not having that averaging, because I think it would be very helpful, by the way. So I'm going to jump on your idea.
All right, close it. Yeah, I closed it already. So,
Make a motion to approve.
I'd like to second that motion.
Any more comments?
Yeah, just before we vote, I want to thank you for working with the neighbors. I've been on ZAB, well, not that long as a regular member, but I subbed frequently, and actually, you said it's rare. I don't recall this level of good feelings and vibes. Okay, so thank you all.
All right, any other comments before we do a roll call vote on the motion? Well, we're going to approve it, so just...
I just had a quick question. Wait, so we're not able to issue a variance if that helps them at all, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
They don't want. Okay, never mind then.
That's not a thing we do.
Okay, cool. Never mind. Let's go home.
Oh, approve version 1. Right, Teresa?
Option 1.
Wait, Teresa, you made the motion, right? Option 1, right? We need to specify.
The option that the applicant preferred.
Okay, which was 1? Option 1.
Yep.
The 13.62. Okay, any other comments before we do a roll call vote? All right, Greg, wake up.
I'm awake, thank you. Board Member Teresa Clark.
Yes.
Board Member Donaldson.
Yes.
Yes.
Board Member Solowski.
Yes.
Board Member Brazil Clark.
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Board Member Simon Weisberg.
Yes.
Board Member Sheehan.
Yes.
Board Member Hauser.
Yes.
Chair O'Keefe.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
And so last on the agenda was to do the minutes, and I have a
Yeah, we gotta
recommendation.
talk about the minutes. There's an issue with the minutes.
Yeah, and my recommendation is,
Okay.
I don't know if
Wait. People don't know what the issue is.
Well,
Why don't you give your recommendation?
the way I understand, well, do you want the recommendation or what I understand? You don't want to know what I understand. I think it should be continued, and the reason is, we may have been directed by the clerk to use that specific language, or maybe we came up with it to try to approximate what they asked. I can't find anything in the Commissioner's Handbook that gives us guidance on it. I can't think of the right word for it, but I understand why you would like it to be changed, and I'd like to try to change it. So I think instead of trying to do it tonight and then inadvertently undoing something that the clerk found that we had to do, I'd like to just, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, there's
continue.
no rush to approve minutes.
No.
And I'll be here at the next one, too.
Okay, good. And it just, bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Just so you guys know, it has to do with the way, there was an irregularity with
What was the confusion?
of confusion with Leah's status last time, and she objected to the way it was worded, and so, which was a fair objection as far as I could tell. So we were looking for other wording, but yeah, I think it's reasonable to just continue it and get some guidance by the clerk and talk about this offline, and then we'll have a solution next time, and we can talk about it then.
Yeah, and you don't actually have to do anything. You can just choose not to do anything, and it automatically will be on the agenda next time.
All right. Should we adjourn then?
Yep.
Oh, please.
Okay, thanks for letting me chair, guys. That was fun.
Good job.
Good job.
Make a good chief.
Meeting adjourned.
Make